Chapter 111. Although Gao Xiong and the others robbed at sea and obtained quite a bit of gold and silver, who would bring copper onto the ship? Now that we have obtained so much copper, we can solve their problem. This is something that no amount of silver can solve. Yang Qindong's explanation and reply allowed Xiao Yin to understand. She immediately said happily, "So you're saying that we've profited this time?" "Of course we've profited." Yang Qindong also smiled and nodded. In his heart, he thought that if it wasn't for the fact that Shi Pu and the others couldn't see the importance of copper, they wouldn't have succeeded so easily this time. Shi Pu had made a trip to the Yang clan manor and then transported quite a bit of copper to exchange for ready-made fireplaces. For a moment, this had alleviated the officials' need for fireplaces and received praise from the officials. This had also improved Yang Qindong's reputation among the officials. Before this, there were still a few officials who had installed fireplaces in advance, such as the direct relatives of the Yang clan and the Hu clan. In the Hu clan, no matter how cold it was outside, it was like spring all year round in here. Naturally, this was all thanks to the installation of the fireplaces. We're all thanks to young Mississippi. In the bedroom, Xiaoqing, who was still wearing her summer clothes, giggled as she looked at young Miss Hu Yen, who was dressing up in front of the dressing table. Her eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled. "Xiaoqing, you're asking for a beating." Hearing the maidservant teasing her, Hu Yen, whose face was slightly red, turned around and raised her arm as if to hit Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing had already jumped far away and was still giggling as she said, "Young Miss still won't admit it? Look at those important officials who haven't installed a fireplace. Even those Duke's Manors who spent a lot of money still have to wait in line. Yet our Hu clan didn't do anything and installed everything that should be installed. Also, the mirror in young Miss's room, the perfume, the glass on the window, which one of them isn't priceless and is limited in supply. Yet you can see them all here. What does the East Marshal want? Everyone in the capital knows, so how could young Miss not know?" Knowing that she wouldn't be able to hit Xiaoqing, Hu Yen simply returned to her chair. She shook her unkempt hair and said, "You all know, but why hasn't he come to propose marriage? It's going to be the New Year soon and I'll be 17 years old. So young Miss was looking forward to a marriage proposal. You really don't know shame." After little Qing heard this, she skipped over again. "All right, little Qing, I'm talking business with you. You said that he treats me so well and the whole family can see it, but why didn't he ask for my hand in marriage? What is he waiting for?" Hu Yen said with a bitter smile. Many 16-year-old girls were already married. However, Yang Qindong didn't even propose marriage, which made her a little uncertain. "I don't know." Once they started talking about serious matters, little Qing regained her serious look and shook her head vigorously. However, she quickly nodded and said, "If we don't know, we can find someone to ask. Isn't young Miss often in contact with big sister Yang? Why don't we find an opportunity to ask her and let her ask her brother? It shouldn't be a problem, right?" "Yes." Hu Yen nodded, thinking that little Qing's idea was not bad. In her mind, she began to think of a time to go to the Wangfu and see Yang family's eldest sister, Yang Fei, to sound her out. 1449, the first month of the 14th year of the Zhengtong dynasty. Within Chichen City. With the agreement of Gao Xiong, Leng Song, and a bunch of military officers, instructors and political instructors, the attack on Lukang began. They used 2 months to get a clear understanding of the situation in Lukang and Taichung. Coincidentally, the shipyard had developed a new generation of fast ships, and they had officially tested it, proving its superiority. When the Navy and land forces announced that they would attack Lukang at dawn tomorrow, they would occupy it by land and sea, and then take down Taichung. In order to ensure the success of this operation and to reduce their own casualties and losses. For this battle, they would use the new ships number 1, number 2, and number 3 as the vanguard, led by Gao Xiong himself. There were 4 new ships. Number 4 went to South America and North America to search for rubber trees, and there were 100 ships of different sizes. There were 100 ships of other models, carrying 3 regular Navy companies and 2,000 auxiliary Navy soldiers. The moment they appeared, they would appear on Lukang with lightning speed and catch the enemy off guard. On land, Leng Song personally led the troops, using 3 regular army companies and 2,000 auxiliary army soldiers. After taking down Lukang, they went straight for Taichung and took over half of Ryukyu Island. Before this, a total of 3 exercises had been conducted, and any problems that might arise had been properly resolved. Filled with confidence, a total of 4,600 soldiers ate dinner and rested for 4 hours before the army set off. They slowly approached Port Dear without making a single sound. On the ocean, the moonlight shone, and the ripples were like a mirror that had been split into hundreds of pieces, reflecting huge shadows. New number 1, new number 2, and new number 3, which had just been completed by the shipyard, were 3 large and fast ships. Faintly, they appeared in the ocean 20 miles away from Deer Port. Behind him there were hundreds of horse ships, grain ships, warships and warships of all kinds. Gao Xiong, who was leading the team, stood in the command cabin of the new number 1 ship. When he looked up, a dark cloud happened to appear, blocking the bright moonlight. He was the one who issued a clear and loud order. "Let's go." Just as the order was given, the sound of the ship's engine starting could be heard. Back then, the ships relied on human power to move the sails when there was wind, but the oars when there was no wind. The biggest difference between the new ships and them was that they had internal combustion engines, usually diesel engines, that were connected by shafts and had propellers that spun. The propellers would stir the water, and the water would give a reaction force that would be transmitted to the ship through the shafts and diesel engines, pushing the ship forward. This way, not only could they save a lot of manpower and resources, but more importantly, they were extremely fast. It was only a distance of 20 miles, but they arrived at Deer Harbor in less than 15 minutes. They had never thought that someone would come looking for trouble from the sea. At this moment, the gates were wide open, like an unguarded city that never sleeps. It wasn't until the number 1, number 2 and number 3 warships lined up in a straight line and prepared their Type 90 60mm mortars to fire that the warships belonging to the first Shang dynasty in Deer Port finally came to their senses. In the dark night, it was impossible to see how many enemy ships were there. However, once they discovered the enemy, the 300-odd warships in the harbor were about to retaliate. When the alarm sounded, countless sailors ran out from the military camp on land. From the looks of it, they were about to board the ship to face the enemy. In the harbor, there were more than 10 warships from the first Shang dynasty that were stationed there all year round. They were about to turn and face the enemy. Attack. If anyone dares to retaliate, sink them all. In the command cabin, Gao Xiong issued orders as he stared intently at Deer Harbor for any signs of movement. Boom boom boom. Following the order, the number 1, number 2 and number 3 cannons on the number 1, number 2, and number 3 ships started firing at the moving enemy ships. The powerful flames were like the brightest beacon in the dark night, instantly lighting up half of Lukong. At the same time, a few moving warships from the first Shang dynasty were hit and destroyed. The powerful modern cannons had an unimaginable attack power. No matter what kind of ship it was, as long as it was hit by the cannons, it would immediately shatter into pieces. There would only be the sound of people screaming and not the slightest bit of resistance. 3 cannons at a time. After 3 consecutive rounds, the precision of the cannons made the first Shang dynasty's warships that were moving like snails into fixed targets. The only thing they could do was to become the target of the cannons and wait for the cannons to hit them. The flames soared into the sky and the sound of people screaming spread out, causing the sailors on land who wanted to board the ships to stop in their tracks in fear. Who is it? How could their firearms be so powerful? If we charge onto the ships now, how is that different from seeking death? The sailors didn't dare to act rashly. After all, no one was an idiot. No one would dare to charge forward even if they knew that they would die. In the command room of number 1, Gao Xiong was looking at the scene in front of him proudly. He didn't give the order to fire the cannons as he was following Yang Qindong's orders. There were too many Han people on Ryukyu Island and it was best not to kill people of his own race. Furthermore, the 9 cannons were enough to cause the enemy to panic. His ambush mission was already more than half completed. Now he just had to wait for the other ships to catch up. Then it would be time for the army to press forward and seize the ships and captives. Using the fact that the ships behind were too slow and didn't have enough space to catch up, Gao Xiong turned his head and looked at Yu Qian and Xinyu who were staring at him in disbelief. "Two sirs? In your opinion, how is the strength of our navy?" "Amazing. Inconceivable, simply inconceivable. Wherever the cannons go, who can fight against them?" Xinyu's face was full of shock as he sighed. Even Yu Qian, an important minister recorded in the history of the Ming dynasty, a man who had once single-handedly reversed the history of the Ming dynasty, didn't have a trace of calmness at this moment. His eyes were also wide open as he stared at the scene in front of him. In fact, what Yu Qian saw was too many things that could surprise him. Ever since he was captured and transported to Chichen City, he felt that everything he saw was like a dream. The spacious cement roads in the city, the orderly streets, the lush green trees, the rosy complexions of the people who were happy every day, and the new army that always maintained a high spirit. All of this was something he didn't even dare to dream about. Chapter 112. Everyone had something to do and money to earn. Regardless of their birth, as long as one of their parents was Han, they would be able to receive a good education from a young age. When people fell sick, they would have money to treat them, and the greatest guarantee was the possibility of dying from illness. There were 3 meals a day, not 2. Not only that, they could eat meat for every meal and everyone had new clothes to wear. This seemed to be something that only humans could dream of, right? But right now, all of this was happening in Crimson City. Those bright windows were something that even the great Ming Imperial Palace didn't have the money to install, but it was extremely common here. There were also power plants, munitions factories, furniture factories, garment factories, cement factories, shipyards, glass factories, paper factories, and so on that he had never heard of before. Wherever he went, he was shocked, and it was the kind of shock that went straight to the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't for Crimson City, he wouldn't have known that the world could be so beautiful. After 2 months of visiting, Yu Qian finally found out that this was the property of Yang Shima, who didn't have a high position in the capital and didn't have much authority. Everything here was made by this person. This place was even more prosperous than the capital in Nanjing, and it was actually the private property of the 6th young master of the Yang clan? Then what was he trying to do? Yu Qian couldn't understand, or rather, he didn't dare to think about it. But after witnessing the naval battle of Deer Harbor tonight, he finally realized that his suspicions were about to come true. As an official of the Great Ming Dynasty, the first thing he had to do was to spread the news of this place. It would be best if he could let all the officials in the court know about what was happening in Crimson City. But could he escape? And if he really did go out, would anyone believe him if he told them what he saw? Even if someone believed him, with the current military strength of the Ming Dynasty, would they be able to defeat the new army in Crimson City? All sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind like a movie. Yu Qian realized that the expansion of Crimson City was unavoidable, and it wasn't something that could be stopped by human strength. Gao Xiong chuckled and proudly looked at the 2 people who were named by the 6th young master to take special care of. From his point of view, what important officials of the Great Ming Dynasty. At this moment, they had probably been blinded by everything in front of them and were scared out of their wits. On the land of Deer Harbor, thousands of sailors stood there, not daring to move. The flames in front of them seemed to be a warning to them. If they dared to step into the warship, they would be smashed into smithereens. Who wouldn't be afraid of death? This was especially so for the first Shang dynasty, who knew that they would definitely die and couldn't even pay their soldiers. Hesitation could be seen in the eyes of the soldiers. What's going on? Why haven't you boarded yet? What are you waiting for? A loud roar sounded out. Just as the Navy members were hesitating to move forward, a man wearing the first Shang dynasty's military uniform rushed over with his troops. General Pan has come. Some of the sailors had already recognized the identity of the person who had come. Pan Tao, the general guarding Deer Harbor. He was also one of the trusted generals of the first Shang dynasty's 13-year-old king, Shangde. It was because of Pan Tao's existence that Deer Harbor became an impregnable pass. It became the biggest barrier between Qichen City and the first Shang dynasty. Pan Tao also heard the commotion outside and brought thousands of troops over. From afar, he first saw the flames that soared into the sky. Following that, he saw the thousands of sailors standing together on the shore in a mess. Seeing that a huge battle was about to happen, all the sailors actually didn't board the warship but stayed on the shore. Instantly he was furious. Just as he got closer, a loud roar sounded out. The sailors who were originally hesitating were all frightened when they saw Pan Tao bringing his troops over. They started to walk towards the warship that was anchored at the harbor. This Pan Tao was famous for killing people without blinking. If they stayed here, they would be killed by this person before they could be killed by the powerful cannons. Since they were going to die no matter what, they might as well try their luck on the warship. Over 300 warships, even if only a third of them managed to make it out, it would still be a bloody battle for the Yang family navy. Even if they had advanced weapons, casualties would still be unavoidable. The situation of the battle seemed to be changing. At this moment, the Yang family army that was already prepared on land began to move. Sniper rifle, can you find Pan Tao's exact location? Lung Song, who was hiding 800 meters away from Deer Harbor, used the night vision binoculars in his hands to see everything that was happening. When he realized that Pan Tao's appearance could cause chaos in the battle and increase the difficulty of taking over Deer Harbor, he asked the sniper beside him, who was skilled in shooting. Reporting to battalion commander, there are too many people and they are too densely packed. We can't accurately hit the target. The sniper shook his head dejectedly. Was it because his shooting skills were bad? It wasn't that his observation skills weren't good enough or that the range of the sniper rifle wasn't good enough. It was just that there were too many people, densely packed and extremely chaotic. It wasn't realistic to want to take Pan Tao's life with one shot. Hearing that the sniper couldn't complete his mission successfully, a sharp glint flashed across Lung Song's eyes. He seemed to have made up his mind as he said, "Rocket launchers, get ready. Everyone move forward. When you have enough range, fire indiscriminately." Originally he only wanted to take Pan Tao's life. However, the scouts found out that this person was entrusted with an important task by the first Shang dynasty's king, Shangde. It was impossible for him to surrender. Since that was the case, he could only kill him. Although this person was also a descendant of the Han people, if he died, more Han people would submit to him. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. However, the situation didn't allow it. He could only let Lung Song kill more people. War had always been cruel and there was no right or wrong. This was because history was written by the victors. Lung Song gave the order, and the 3 companies of 300 outstanding cold vanguard soldiers moved forward with him. Behind them were 2,000 auxiliary soldiers. Even though they were auxiliary soldiers, their movements were still nimble. Even though they were following behind the main soldiers, they weren't too far behind. On Deer Port, because of Pan Tao's appearance, there were Navy members who were walking towards their ships. However, no matter how you looked at it, these people's speed wasn't fast enough. They were like crawling snails. "All of you hurry up. Whoever is behind will be punished for disobeying orders. Behead." Seeing that this was going to continue, who knew how long it would take for them to form enough resistance on the sea? Pan Tao roared angrily. As expected, the moment the order was given, the Navy members' movements became much faster. In the new command cabin, Gao Xiong was observing everything through his binoculars. When he saw more enemies boarding the ships, he couldn't help but say anxiously, "This Lung Song, what is he doing? Why isn't he launching a land attack? Forget it, forget it. Order the cannons to extend and fire at the enemies boarding the ships." Boom boom boom. The 3 new ships fired 3 cannons as planned, hitting the intersection of the waterways in Deer Port. The powerful shockwave from the explosion instantly took away at least 100 lives. The number of injured people who were hit by the shockwave was uncountable. After the 3 cannons were fired, Lung Song led the army to the left side of the enemy 200 meters away. Immediately, 5 rocket launchers fired at the same time, launching an indiscriminate attack. Wherever General Pan Tao was suspected to be, he became the focus of the firepower. Boom 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 boom. After the 5 consecutive shots, under the powerful firepower, a large number of enemies fell to the ground. Waves of cries and howls could be heard. Countless broken limbs were scattered everywhere. Advance and attack formation. Anyone who doesn't surrender, kill. Lung Song saw that the first wave of rocket launchers had caused heavy damage to the enemy. He was the first to stand up from the ground. Following him, the 300 soldiers of the Lung army marched forward in a straight line, maintaining a complete formation. Yang Chendong had taught them before that if they could attack, they shouldn't defend. He also said that attacking was the best defense and also the last resort to solve all problems. Following this order, and to reduce the number of casualties, Lung Song decided not to attack. Once they attacked, they had to hurt the enemy until they didn't know which direction was north, south, east and west. Only then would they choose to surrender faster. The 300 soldiers of the Lung army spat out tongues of fire from their guns. In the darkness, they were like an unbreakable fire net as they closed in step by step. Behind them, the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers wielding large swords and spears weren't idle either. Although they couldn't walk in front with spears because of their status, they still shouted in unison, "Those who surrender will not be killed. Those who surrender will not be killed." In the chaos of the cannons, the place where Pan Tao was at became the focus of the attack. After losing contact with the general, facing the continuous barrage of fire, those who wanted to attack with swords were shot and fell to the ground, not moving at all. Under such a strong pressure, the Shang dynasty soldiers guarding Deer Port were forced to retreat. Countless times, reality told them that those who wanted to charge with weapons would inevitably die. In such a situation where they would die if they charged forward, no one could muster up the courage to charge forward. Just as the army was advancing with an unstoppable momentum, the Yang family navy finally arrived. Under the primitive speed of the boat, which only relied on the sails and the rowers, the distance of 20 miles took them nearly 2 incense sticks of time longer than the other boats. But no matter what, they still managed to arrive. Then, it was the arrival of the army. The huge commotion had already created a psychological pressure on the soldiers of Deerport. Those who kneel and surrender will not be killed. Chapter 113. The shouts continued to come from the mouths of the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers. These shouts were the last straw that broke the camel's back. Seeing that the tide was turning, the first Shang dynasty soldier finally threw his weapon to the ground, squatted down and hugged his head, making a gesture of surrender. With the first person, the second, the third, and soon the sound of weapons being thrown to the ground could be heard. This army had completely lost their morale. The Yang family navy quickly stationed themselves at Deer Harbor. Large batches of auxiliary soldiers walked out of the warships and picked up the weapons that were thrown on the ground in an orderly manner. Then groups of captives were tied together like candied haws. Battalion Commander Gao, I'll leave this place to you. I'll lead the army and rush to Taichung City. We'll try to liberate the place before dawn. Lung Song walked in front of Gao Xiong, who had just landed, and saluted with a hint of excitement on his face. Some people were born to be soldiers. They weren't afraid of war. On the contrary, if there was no war, they would feel that something was missing. Lung Song and Gao Xiong were clearly such people. All right, Battalion Commander Lung, just go. Leave this place to me. All right, do you need me to send some men to assist you? After all, Taichung is a big city on Ryukyu Island. Gao Xiong asked with concern. No need. According to the investigation, there aren't many soldiers there. I'll lead 3 companies of Lung Feng and 2,000 auxiliary soldiers to control the place. Let's go. Lung Song rejected Gao Xiong's support and turned to lead the army towards Taichung City. Keep a close eye on the captives. But remember, don't abuse them or scold them. Gao Xiong watched as Lung Feng left and began to clean up the mess. What was worth mentioning was that Yu Qian and Xin Yu were also busy. They did not know that after more than 2 months of experience, they had gradually begun to adapt to the environment and life here. Moreover, they had already subconsciously treated themselves as a part of Crimson City, doing what they could to the best of their abilities. Taichung City. The city walls were more than 10 meters tall and could be considered one of the biggest cities on Ryukyu Island. There were nearly 200,000 people here. Many of them had migrated here from the mainland. They slowly adapted to life here and spread their branches and leaves. Deer Harbor was only a dozen or so kilometers away. When the cannons roared in the distance, the citizens in the city could more or less sense it. This caused many people to anxiously stay at home, not daring to go out and ask around. It was like the darkness before dawn, causing the entire city to be under a terrifying pressure. It was as if any spark could ignite it. After more than an hour, Lung Song led the army to Taichung City. With their arrival, the city gates opened from the inside. This was the work of the infiltration team. The city gates opened and without much effort, the army entered the city. Following that, they quickly took control of the important officials of the First Shang dynasty and the 4 city gates. As for the less than 500 guards in the city, they were either killed or surrendered. There was no third option. They took control of the entire Taichung city in an instant. This was the well-trained Lung Feng. They did not harm a single person, nor did they steal anything from the citizens. The next morning, when some brave citizens pushed open their doors and walked out onto the streets, they realized that there were many tall, fit, and energetic young soldiers. They were different from the original city guards. They were courteous and did not offend the people. When some people fell on the street out of fear of seeing them, these patrolling and maintaining law and order soldiers would stop and help them up. They were as amiable as big brothers who had been neighbors for many years. The actions of the auxiliary soldiers eventually influenced the citizens in the city. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and more citizens walked out of their homes. Taichung City was as before. With lightning speed, they took down Deer Harbor in a single night. Under the rapid march, they took down Taichung City without shedding a drop of blood. This caused the situation on Ryukyu Island to change drastically. Originally, with Crimson Castle as the base, it only took up 1/8 of the entire Ryukyu Island. However, after taking down Qishan, Alishan, Yushan, Lukang, and Taichung, they had taken over at least 2/3 of the island. The remaining 1/3 was where the First Shang dynasty's capital was located, which was the central north region. However, it was also the most densely populated place on Ryukyu Island. In the Battle of Deer Harbor and Taichung, they killed more than 1,000 enemies and captured more than 11,000 people. This greatly increased the population of the Yang clan, allowing them to reach a population of 400,000. Including the auxiliary soldiers, they had close to 10,000 people. They took over 300 ships and more than 5,000 sailors. This battle greatly increased the strength of the Yang clan. At the same time, it allowed them to become the strongest faction on Ryukyu Island. The Battle of Deer Harbor was a battle where they won with a small number of people. At the same time, it also proved that quality was more important than quantity. However, at this time, whether it was Gao Xiong or Lung Song, they didn't want to expand their gains and enter the central region. Under the rapid development, the Yang clan needed to stabilize and digest. They didn't want to continue swallowing. Otherwise, there might be internal chaos. Yang Qindong once said that battles had to be fought one by one and cities had to be conquered one by one. One shouldn't only think about conquering territory and neglect internal development. If that happened, the quality of life of the people would deteriorate. If that happened, the building might collapse at any time. What the new army needed now was to digest everything that they had just obtained. This might take half a year or even longer. These people needed to redistribute the land, learn new things, learn how to be hygienic and polite, and completely integrate into the Yang clan system. In half a year they would only learn the surface. Fortunately, both the new army and Yang Qindong, who was their leader, were young enough. They still had time to develop everything. Moreover, they could use this time to negotiate with the first Shang dynasty and see if there was any hope of peacefully taking over the central region and reducing the killing. Negotiation. This was one of the Yang clan's methods, a way to stall for time. They needed to digest their gains. Negotiation. This was indeed the only way for the first Shang dynasty to resolve the current crisis. After Lung Song expressed his willingness to negotiate, the other party's diplomatic group arrived. They were extremely humble and directly expressed their intention to submit. They expressed that they were willing to become a vassal state and were willing to pay tribute every year. However, they also stated their request, which was to ensure the existence of autonomy. With Taichung as the dividing line, the northern region would belong to the first Shang dynasty and the southern region would belong to the Yang clan. Such an outcome was clearly not in line with Yang Qindong's previous plans. He wanted to fully occupy Little Ryukyu Island. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, they could talk slowly. Once the new army digested their gains, they could start another war and completely solve the problem of Little Ryukyu Island. Yang Qindong's forces were developing rapidly. In the capital, he was quietly preparing for the new year in the Yang clan manner. 1449, the 14th year of the Jianghu dynasty. This year would be recorded in the annals of history. If everything went as expected, the famous Tumul Fortress incident would occur this year, signifying the beginning of the Ming dynasty's decline. In truth, from the moment he entered the capital, Yang Qindong had been thinking about his next move. He already knew what was going to happen. With Yang Qindong's abilities, he was completely capable of changing history and nipping in the bud. But he had never done so. In fact, he had only been using his troops on Little Ryukyu Island. In the Great Ming, he had only been developing commerce and establishing Yangbao and the immortal abode. He was afraid that if he made too big of a move, it would affect the course of history. In the current Ming dynasty, eunuchs were in power, causing all the ministers to feel insecure. Treacherous officials were in power, and even the position of eunuch was hereditary. If this continued, something would happen to the Great Ming sooner or later, and the only ones to suffer would be the common people. As a Han, Yang Qindong naturally didn't want to see his compatriots suffer. What he wanted was to see the Han grow stronger and become the rulers of the world. For this goal, the hundreds of thousands of Han brothers in the Tumul Fortress incident could only become sacrificial lambs. With a sigh, Yang Qindong thought about how many loyal officials and generals would die in the Tumul Fortress incident. This was a loss for the Great Ming, a loss for the country. But when he thought about how he couldn't do anything with his current status and influence, even if he mobilized the Chizian army, he might draw the ire of the imperial court and the tolerance of the Walla. After all, to resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. Young master, big sister is here. Yang Qindong sighed in his study when he saw Qiaoyin enter with a smile. Big sister is here? Hearing that Yang Fei was here, Yang Qindong immediately got up and went out to welcome her. Among his brothers and sisters, he had the deepest feelings for his big sister, and he respected her the most. Other than the fact that she had raised him when he was young, it was also because Yang Fei gave him the feeling that she was like a mother. In the main hall of the Yang family manor, Yang Fei sat on a chair and tasted tea. Behind her stood two personal maids. Thinking back, when Yang Fei got married, the Yang family was at the peak of its power, so she naturally married into a good family. At that time, the Wang family was also a large family. Now, Big Sister's husband, Wang Ming, had become a rank 5 official at the Ministry of Rites in his early 40s. Wang Ming was a scholarly person and he treated Yang Fei with respect. The two of them had always lived in harmony. Yang Fei was knowledgeable and had the style of a noble mother. The entire Wang family was managed by her in an orderly manner, and she had been praised by many people. Chapter 114. Just looking at Yang Fei, her life was pretty good and she should be satisfied. But because of her younger brothers and sisters, she had no choice but to worry about them. Sometimes she would even think of ways to help them financially. Over the years, her body was not as good as before. Fortunately, Yang Qindong entered the capital. His appearance changed the situation of the descendants of the Yang family. This made Yang Fei feel that the pressure on her was reduced by a lot. As for her other sisters, they could get 1,000 taels of silver from Yang Qindong every month. After having money, her position in her husband's family naturally rose. In addition, it was rumored that the sixth young master of the Yang family had a good relationship with eunuch Wang Zhen. This made them even more afraid to make things difficult for the Yang family. Suddenly, Yang Fei did not need to worry about her sisters and felt that she had nothing to do. Not long ago, the daughter of the Hu family, Hu Yan, came looking for her. Although she did not say anything and only gave a simple greeting, Yang Fei knew what she was thinking. Thinking that her little brother would be 19 years old after the new year, it was time to settle the problem of marriage. Thus, she came looking for her before the new year. Big sister. Still wearing his green clothes, Yang Qindong appeared with a smile. He did not know why, but in front of Yang Fei, he could always put down the burden on his body and become relaxed. Is big sister's body much better? I still have a few anti-inflammatory medicines here. When big sister leaves, bring them back. If you have any headache or fever, you can use them at your discretion. Good, big sister's body is already fine. I have troubled little brother. Yang Fei's face was full of smiles. Her eyes were filled with satisfaction and happiness. Originally, she thought that the few young master of the Yang family did not live up to expectations and that the Yang family would decline from now on. She never thought that Yang Qindong, who did not speak much when he was young, would suddenly change greatly after he grew up and become so talented. This was an unexpected surprise and also let Yang Fei see the hope of the Yang family rising again. You are my big sister. It is natural for little brother to care about you. Regarding Yang Qindong calling him little brother, this special title, not only did Yang Qindong not object, he even felt at ease. He felt that this was a kind of intimacy. Of course, if it was someone else who called him little brother, he would probably be the first to object. Even if his second brother called him little six, he would get angry. That's right, you still know that I'm your big sister? Since little brother is so concerned about big sister should also be concerned about little brother. Tell me, what do you think of the Hu family's Hu Yan? Yang Qindong's face suddenly became much more serious as she stared at Yang Qindong with bright eyes. Hearing that big sister was actually doing this for Hu Yan, Yang Qindong coughed lightly and said somewhat awkwardly, "Big sister, little brother is still young. I don't want to. I have no choice but to do so. Let me tell you this time, don't play dumb with me. You have to give big sister a clear attitude. Is it okay or not? If it's okay, I will immediately send someone to the Hu family to propose marriage. If it's not okay, you have to tell them so that they don't get in the way." Yang Fei stared at Yang Qindong for an answer. The reason why she was so serious was probably because whenever she mentioned this matter in the past, Yang Qindong would change the topic, causing her to not know where the topic went every time. Today she had made sufficient preparations. If she didn't get an answer, she definitely wouldn't give up. Big sister's eyes stared closely at Yang Qindong, causing him to feel even more awkward. For a moment he didn't know what to say. He only scratched his head and said, "Little brother thinks that this matter really doesn't need to be too anxious." Yang Qindong, who had always been calm in the face of trouble and gave others the feeling that he was always successful and ignorant, was indeed at a loss like a child right now. This appearance directly caused Xiaoyin, who was beside him, to cover her mouth and laugh softly. Not only that, the two personal maids following behind Yang Fei also had smiles on their faces. Clearly, they also rarely saw the sixth young master, who had always been calm and collected, reveal such a childish appearance. Big sister Yang Qindong, on the other hand, couldn't help but sigh softly when she saw Yang Qindong in such a difficult position. "Little brother, you might think that big sister is a little overbearing, but think about it. Hu Yan has always stayed in the word pavilion for you. Now she will be 17 after the new year. During this time, who knows how many nobles have come to propose marriage, but they were all rejected. She is waiting for you. Then, even if you think that you are still young, you have to give her an explanation. You can't just wait bitterly like this. What is going on?" She wanted Yang Qindong to be responsible for her. If he couldn't bear this responsibility, Then he had to tell her and let her prepare early. At the very least he couldn't delay her. Yang Qindong knew that Yang Fei's words were very reasonable. He immediately replied, "Yes, big sister is right. How about this? I will propose marriage to the Hu clan at the end of this year." Taking a deep breath, Yang Qindong made his decision. This wasn't just because Yang Qindong knew that Hu Yan liked him. In fact, he also liked this playful and cute girl very much. In addition, her background was the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao. She was definitely a descendant of a prestigious family. Marrying such a girl would also be helpful for him when he wanted to leave in the future. This was equivalent to him finding a strong ally in the imperial court. Yang Qindong finally gave an answer. Yang Fei let out a long sigh of relief. "Okay, little brother, this is what you said. I will reply to the Hu clan like this. When the time comes, you can't go back on your words." "I won't go back on my words, I won't go back on my words." Yang Qindong shook his head and smiled bitterly. He really didn't expect that his first marriage in 2 lifetimes would be completed under pressure. Of course, this was also his own choice. If he didn't want to, then in this world there really wasn't anyone who could make things difficult for him. Seeing that the young master had finally decided on his marriage, Xiao Yin was also happy. Although she was already the young master's bed-warming servant girl and had even done the deed of husband and wife, she was very clear in her heart that with her background, being able to reach this step was already very difficult. Wanting to become the main wife, this was simply impossible in the society of that time. Fortunately, she had interacted with Hu Yan before. This girl was kind-hearted and should be easy to get along with. Finally deciding on marriage, when the news spread back to the Hu clan, Hu Yan was naturally full of joy. Although she still had to wait for nearly a year, she was willing to endure it. In her opinion, she was destined to be the Dong Shuai's bride. As for the night, it wasn't a big deal. The clan head was getting married at the end of the year. When the news spread throughout the Yang clan manor, all of the villagers were extremely happy. Ever since the patriarch came to the Yang village, the villagers' lives were getting better day by day. Today, during the new year, each family was given 20 caddies of meat and 2 taels of silver. This kind of treatment was something that even their ancestors had never experienced before. For a moment, everyone was overjoyed. The bells of the new year rang out, and the capital fell into a celebratory mood. The immortal abode didn't require any seats. Every day, several thousand people came in and money poured in. The novel programs and moving music made everyone who entered applaud. Naturally, this place became a popular place for wealthy guests. Just the number of people who applied for membership cards increased by several times. The total number of people who applied for 3 types of membership added up to 3,000. Just the sheer number of members made it so that if one wanted to spend money in the immortal abode, they had to make a reservation in advance. This made the business even more explosive. A large amount of money flowed into Yang Qindong's hands, causing others to gnash their teeth in anger. Some of the restaurants in the area and even some of the red light district's businesses were greatly affected. With new music to listen to, who would want to listen to old songs that had been memorized countless times? The popularity of the immortal abode naturally drew the envy of many, but compared to the profits of the sky beyond heaven, it paled in comparison. The sky beyond heaven silently opened for business 3 days after the immortal abode opened for business. Because of the novelty of its products, it instantly became popular. This was especially true after the immortal abode introduced a limited supply system. Many merchants had no choice but to squeeze their way in. Putting aside the other products, only 500 large bags of toilet paper were sold each day, for a total of 5,000 small bags. This was simply not enough to satisfy the needs of the high officials and nobles of the capital, and this wasn't even taking into account the many wealthy merchants of lower status who still had plenty of money in their pockets. After getting used to this soft paper, who would want to replace it with anything else? Even though a large bag of toilet paper sold for the astronomical price of 2 taels of silver, it was still sold out every morning when the store opened for business. Just this alone made a profit of 2,000 taels of silver, but in reality, even with the cost of transportation, it didn't even make 10 taels of silver. This was an almost invisible cost. Just the unremarkable toilet paper alone could make 2,000 taels of silver a day. That was more than 50,000 taels of silver a month. From this, one could see just how lucrative the profits were. There was also a perfume that no one had ever seen before. Not to mention anything else, just the beautiful glass bottle that was used to package the perfume was worth quite a lot. Only 100 bottles were sold every day, but each bottle was sold at a price of 50 taels. It was enough for the young ladies of the rich families to snatch it up in an instant. In this way they could make another 100,000 taels of silver a month. There was no need to mention all these things one by one. The popularity of the sky beyond heaven was mainly due to the novelty of its products. Even when other merchants saw them, they felt as if they couldn't touch them. The limited supply of goods made it impossible for them to store large quantities of goods. What if they couldn't even meet the demand in the capital? How could they possibly sell these goods elsewhere? Businessmen were all profit-seeking. For their own interests they had looked for Jianghu more than once. This was the spokesperson of Dong Shui in the business world. They expressed that they hoped to get more goods. They even said that they did not care about the price as long as there were goods for them to sell. After all, no matter how expensive it would still have to be sold at a higher price. Chapter 115. After consulting Yang Qindong on this matter, Yang Fu expressed that the Dong Shui, in order to ensure that the common people of the Great Ming could enjoy the benefits of these high-class goods, decided to provide a certain amount of goods to the merchants. As for the quantity, it could be twice as much as the daily limit in the capital. But there were also conditions. First, the highest bidder would win, and second, the goods could not appear on the market in the capital. This method of bidding was naturally Yang Qindong's idea. He knew that the nature of merchants was to seek profit. As long as they could obtain profit, they wouldn't care about what sort of people they were dealing with. They wouldn't care about the righteousness of the country or etiquette or shame. It was just like how in the later stages of the dynasty, the merchant groups and the power groups would collude, all of them aiming for military provisions and equipment. As a result, the Great Ming's defeat had been caused by internal strife. Since they didn't know any better, he might as well earn some of their money. At the very least, with this money in Yang Qindong's hands, he could guarantee that it would be used for the people of the Great Han. After making up his mind, Yang Qindong had Crimson City provide a large amount of goods, and for the sake of saving costs, he even had these merchants go directly to the Tientsin Wharf to pick up the goods. Of course, in principle, the highest bidder would win. This method made the Tientsin Wharf much more lively. Many merchants gathered here, and whenever they obtained a batch of goods through bidding, they would immediately head south to sell them. For a moment, the goods of the Yang clan were spread all over the country. Of course, the one who earned the most was still Yang Qindong, and his influence naturally grew. China was a country of connections, and anything could be done through connections. This seemed to have become a law that would never change. In order to obtain even more goods, many people sought out Yang Qindong through connections, such as his sixth sister, Yang Qin. Before Yang Qindong had come to the capital, Yang Qin had lived a good life, but her status had been very low. This was all because she had married a merchant. Being a third-class merchant meant that she couldn't even compare to the son of a good family. This made it very difficult for her to raise her head in front of her brothers and sisters. With the appearance of Yang Qindong, everything changed. Not only did her most capable sixth brother not look down on her, but he also took good care of her sister. Not only did he give her a monthly salary of 1,000 taels of silver, he also took care of her husband's business quite a bit. It was as if he was taking goods from the Yang family. Other merchants had to bid to obtain the goods, but the Bai family was able to obtain the best quality goods at an internal price from time to time. This allowed their family business to flourish very quickly. Yang Qindong had bestowed this body with the benefits of not forgetting his loved ones when he was rich. Since he had taken over this body, he had to at least treat him well. Otherwise, how was he going to face him after 100 years? Yang Qindong didn't want to do anything wrong, and he didn't want to let down anyone who treated him well. Therefore, as long as he could help, he wouldn't be stingy to the Yang family. In comparison, there were some people who took advantage of him and still wanted to scheme against him. This person was Zhu Qizhen of the Great Ming dynasty. The popularity of the immortal abode and sky beyond heaven, especially the latter, which could be described as close to 10,000 taels of gold a day, deeply stimulated him, the current emperor. Looking at the annual income of his national treasury, which was only 4 to 5 million taels of silver, he heard that this number could be earned by Yang Qindong in 2 months. This made him envious and jealous at the same time. Slowly he forgot that Yang Qindong had once brought him high-yield potatoes. He began to think about how to deal with the East Marshal and obtain more benefits. In the inner court of the imperial palace, Zhu Qizhen saw that Empress Qian was doing some needlework out of boredom. She even said that it was for the sake of generating income for the imperial palace. He couldn't suppress his anger. How could a small crown prince wash horses and earn several times more money than him, the emperor? Why would the empress, who was the mother of the world, want to work to earn more money? Wasn't this showing that he, the emperor, was too incompetent? When a person began to have an idea, it was very difficult to take it back. Zhu Qizhen was the same. Ever since he remembered Yang Qindong, he thought about how to use a method to take a large amount of gold and silver from his hands. This caused him to be unable to sleep at night. Although Zhu Qizhen was the emperor, there were too many things in the world that he could not do anything about. For example, the interests of the officials were not something that he could touch as he wished. Ever since Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty dismissed the 100 schools of thought and respected only Confucianism, Confucianism became the orthodox ideology of feudal society. Under this kind of education system, some of the scholars became the upper class and nobles. In order to ensure that their children and grandchildren could also enjoy glory and wealth, they naturally gathered together. Everyone would swarm to oppose any policies and decisions that targeted them. On the contrary, they would fully support any actions that were beneficial to them. As time passed, their power became greater and greater. Even if a dynasty was destroyed, these people could still change schools and continue their glory. One of the most classic examples was the Kong family. A dynasty's legacy was only 300 to 400 years. Even if it was the Xia, Shang and Zhou dynasties, the strongest dynasty was only the Ji family's 800 years of history. However, a scholar's family was able to continue for 2,000 years. It had to be said that this was a miracle in the history of the world. This was an existence that Zhu Qizhen could not afford to offend. At least, if he wanted to touch these people, he needed a good reason. Yang Qindong was born in the Yang family and could be considered a descendant of a prestigious family. Now that he was a secondary class rank 5 official and was also a high scholar, if he wanted to touch him, he would not be able to convince everyone without a good reason. But what made Zhu Qizhen even more depressed was that his teacher, Wang Zhen, actually had a good personal relationship with Yang Qindong. Wang Zhen had spoken good words for Yang Qindong in front of him more than once. This made Ying Zong feel that if he told his teacher about his plan to deal with Yang Qindong, it would most likely not work. Since he could not tell anyone, Zhu Qizhen wanted to do it himself. Just as he was thinking of the best way to solve this problem, an opportunity came. His third sister, Princess Changde, was about to celebrate her 14th birthday. Princess Changde was the third daughter of the late Emperor Zhu Zhanji. She and Zhu Qizhen shared the same father and mother as each other and was often called the third princess. Because when she was just born, her father had passed away. Zhu Qizhen, as the older brother, had given his younger sister enough brotherly love. Because of this, she was unruly and willful from a young age, slowly becoming an existence that gave her older brother, the emperor, a headache. Every year, whenever it was Princess Changde's birthday, it was also a time for Zhu Qizhen to be troubled. This younger sister's temper was really bad. If there was anything that did not go her way, she would beat and scold them on the spot. When it was her birthday, it was even more so. If her wishes were not satisfied, not only would the eunuchs and palace maids suffer, even he would not be in a good mood. This once-a-year headache was coming again. While Zhu Qizhen was having a headache, he suddenly thought of Yang Qindong. Didn't you say that you were multi-talented? Didn't others say that you were omnipotent? That's good. This third princess' birthday will be in your hands. If it was done well, then it would naturally be a matter of course. On the other hand, if it was not done well, then he would find a legitimate reason to do it. He did not ask for anything to be done to you. You only needed to take out some money and give it to Zhen. If this was the case, then the other ministers would not be able to do anything, right? Could it be that if you did a bad job, then there would be a problem if you just took out some money? With this thought in mind, Zhu Qizhen unexpectedly took the initiative to come to the third princess courtyard for the first time. This made the eunuchs and palace maids who passed by very surprised. They could not understand. What was wrong with the emperor today? Normally he would not be able to avoid them. Why did he take the initiative to come forward today? Princess Changde was currently swinging on a swing in her courtyard. Several palace maids and eunuchs were still kneeling on the side, tears still flowing from their eyes. Clearly it was because of the punishment they had just received. The reason for the punishment was even more speechless. It was because these eunuchs and palace maids did not follow her request to swing the swing to a certain height. And this height did not refer to the highest height, but to the exact height of 120 centimeters from the ground. Thinking about it, even if one used a ruler to measure, it would not be able to achieve such precision. But this was Princess Changde's request. If they could not satisfy her request, then they could only be punished. Zhu Qizhen's sudden appearance caused the eunuchs and palace maids in the courtyard to be shocked. At the same time, they all knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" A figure quickly rushed out from the crowd and arrived in front of Ying Zong. She excitedly shouted, Imperial brother, how come you have time to come see your younger sister today? Seeing the third princess rushing over because she ran too fast, she almost fell to the ground. Ingzong instinctively wanted to dodge. This kind of thing had happened countless times. Once Princess Changde fell to the ground, there would be a burst of howling and crying. As the emperor, if he did not bleed, then there would be no way to stop it. After instinctively taking a step back, Yang Qindong's figure suddenly appeared in Zhu Qizhen's mind. Zhu Qizhen's footsteps naturally came to a stop, and he immediately pulled Princess Changde into a tight embrace. Princess Changde hugged Zhu Qizhen tightly and said coquettishly, "Imperial brother, your younger sister is about to turn 14. Aha, I know. This time we came precisely because of Changde's matter. This time we plan to have Yang Qindong hold a birthday banquet for you. What do you think?" Zhu Qizhen's face was full of smiles as he probed. "Dong Shuai. I've heard of him. Your younger sister has also been to that immortal abode. It's really not bad." A trace of reminiscence appeared in Princess Changde's eyes. She then said happily, "Imperial brother, are you planning to reserve the entire immortal abode?" "Of course not." Zhu Qizhen shook his head. Reserving the entire immortal abode for a princess birthday? He would not do such a foolish thing. Those imperial censors would definitely stand up and criticize him. Moreover, that was Yang Qindong's home ground. If he wanted to cause trouble, it would be difficult for him to do so. This was not in line with his original intentions. Chapter 116. Seeing Zhu Qizhen shake his head, Princess Changde was clearly displeased. "If I don't go to the immortal abode, do I have to celebrate my birthday in the palace as usual? That would be too boring." "Who says that it's boring in the palace? In our opinion, whose idea is more important? Everyone says that Yang Qindong is brimming with talent. If he's the one planning it, it'll be just as exciting, right? Of course, if he doesn't do his best, we'll punish him for his crimes. How about that?" Zhu Qizhen laughed heartily, delighted at the good excuse he'd found. Princess Changde's expression also softened. Good. Imperial brother still loves me dearly. Then let's have him do this. I'd like to see just how he'll make this princess happy. A beautiful smile appeared on her face that was still too young and tender. Princess Changde was the third princess. She was still very pretty. After all, how could someone who'd managed to become the imperial concubine be lacking in looks? Her children would naturally be handsome and beautiful. However, her temper wasn't too good. She was a bit too domineering. The information about the third princess was quickly sent to the study of the Yang manor and placed on Yang Qindong's desk. This was news sent by Mao Mu. With a large amount of money and his status as a eunuch, Mao Mu already had his own influence in the palace. As for the emperor's sudden appearance in the third princess palace, it naturally didn't escape his eyes. "You're going to punish the young master for his crimes?" Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh when he saw the detailed records, including every word Zhu Qizhen had said. Truly, accompanying the monarch was like accompanying a tiger. He'd contributed a high-yield crop like potatoes in exchange for a minor fifth-rank official position. Yang Qindong didn't say anything in response. He'd never intended to stand in the great Ming dynasty's imperial court in the first place. "But not only did you not give me a reward, you actually coveted everything I've obtained and wanted to scheme against me. That's a bit too much." Yang Qindong's face showed a trace of anger, which made him very uncomfortable. Presumably, no one would feel good being stared at by the emperor. Fortunately, Yang Qindong was not an ordinary person, and he knew what it meant by impatience in small matters would spoil great plans. "Fine, since you've already made your move, I'll naturally receive it. Someone bring Lady Shui here." Yang Qindong ordered outside the study and began to plan the birthday party in his mind. He received the news at lunchtime. In the afternoon, a eunuch came to deliver the imperial edict. After explaining the emperor's intention, an imperial edict was delivered to Yang Qindong's hands. After that, the eunuch who delivered the edict leaned over to Yang Qindong, who was kneeling on the ground, and whispered in his ear. Eunuch Wang said that official Yang doesn't need to be too difficult, as long as the situation is good enough. As for His Majesty, Duke Wang will put in a good word for him. "Thank you, Eunuch Wang." Yang Qindong agreed with a smile. Then he winked at Tiger's Mane, who was standing beside him. Immediately, 100 taels of silver were delivered to the eunuch's hands. The eunuch's eyes narrowed into slits as he smiled. As long as there were eunuchs in the palace, there was no one who did not know Yang Qindong. The diapers they were using now were supplied by him, which solved a big problem for them for many years so they could be calm in any situation. In addition, the business of immortal abode in outer sky was booming. The eunuchs were full of curiosity and affection for Yang Shi. Not to mention other things, money was always the favorite thing of these people. In their eyes, it was impossible for them to have any descendants. What would they do when they were old? If they wanted others to serve them willingly, they needed money, the more the better. In their eyes, Yang Qindong was the biggest money tree, so no eunuch would be lazy if they had the chance to come in contact with him. Just like this time, who knew how many eunuchs were scrambling to do this task? And this person in front of him got what he wanted. He only had to make a trip and he received 100 taels of silver. How could he not be happy? The eunuch left happily. As he watched their silhouettes disappear, Ming, who was at the side, came up to him. There was a hint of anger on his face as he said, "Young master, isn't it too much to give them 100 taels just like that? They're just doing their job." "Hey, do you think the young master is still lacking money?" Yang Qindong shook his head unconcernedly. In his eyes, money was perhaps the most worthless thing. If he could use this to buy people's hearts, he didn't mind spending tens of thousands of gold. Only 100 taels of silver could earn him a reputation for being generous. In his eyes, this was completely worth it. Tiger's mane, remember, don't underestimate anyone. Because as long as a person is used well, no matter how inconspicuous they usually are, they can play an extremely important role at a crucial time. Also, it's just spending a bit of money to make people work for us. No matter how you look at it, we're profiting. Using this matter, Yang Qindong taught his most trusted subordinate. "Okay, in a while, you'll receive another 100,000 taels of silver. The intelligence system of the capital needs to be strengthened. I want to know what every important official is doing every day. I also want to know the power distribution of the eunuchs in the palace. I even want to know which concubine Zhu Qizhen favors and where he stayed last night. I want to know everything, understand?" "Yes." Tiger's mane stood at attention and then turned to leave. He was well aware that the young master was advising him as well as hammering him. It seemed like the development of the capital's Bureau of Security was still a little too slow. But it didn't matter. As long as there was enough money, there was nothing that couldn't be done, and there was no information that couldn't be gathered. The third princess was going to celebrate her birthday, and Yang Qindong was in charge of planning it. This matter spread like the wind through the imperial palace, through the imperial court, and even into the manners of the various officials. The reason even the families of the officials knew about it was because the emperor had invited all the daughters of the officials to the imperial palace on the same day and celebrate together. If one were to ask which young master had the most influence in the hearts of the young ladies, if Yang Qindong was ranked second, no one would dare to be first. Even the current emperor, Zhu Qizhen, was slightly inferior. Zhu Qizhen already had Empress Qian and 2 official consorts in the harem. As for the other concubines, they were too numerous to count. Marrying the emperor was indeed glorious, but there were too many challenges to face. There were so many that these girls were worried that they would be eaten alive and spat out after entering the palace. In contrast, Yang Qindong was completely different. He didn't have a wife. Even if he had an official concubine, it was said that he only had Xiao Yin, the maid who warmed his bed, and Lady Shui, who threw herself into his arms. Even Lady Xiang, who was always by his side, was still a virgin. If they could marry Yang Qindong, given their background, they would naturally have a respected status, and that would mean that they would have endless money to spend. Moreover, this person was only 19 years old and he was already a 5th-rank official. His future could be described as limitless. Not to mention that Yang Qindong was originally handsome and confident. Which girl wouldn't like him? When they heard that it was Dong Shui who planned the birthday banquet, the girls' minds became active. They all went to their parents and begged to be allowed to enter the palace on that day. Regarding this, the officials had their own opinions. To be able to become an official of the court, which one of them wasn't experienced? Which one of them hadn't experienced 81 difficulties to achieve success? Which one of them didn't spend their days trying to figure out the emperor's intentions and observing the situation of the court? Because of this, the officials could see that this wasn't a good job to begin with. It was very likely that the emperor had set a trap for Yang Qindong in order to find an opportunity to deal with him. As for what they could obtain after dealing with him, this wasn't something that the officials dared to guess. Since it was a trap, the officials naturally wouldn't allow their daughters' requests. This muddy water wasn't easy to wade in. The officials' reactions were almost the same. Naturally, this kind of matter would be noticed by the East faction guards. Someone immediately reported this matter to Zhu Qizhen. What? The officials don't agree? It's Zhen's younger sister's birthday, how would they dare to disobey? Could it be that they are distressed over the small amount of gift money? Men issue an edict. Tell all the officials in Zhen's name that all of their daughters must enter the palace on that day to celebrate Princess Shangda's birthday. Those who don't comply will be punished for defying the edict. Zhu Qizhen said with a face full of anger. Since he wanted to deal with Yang Qindong, it was naturally better to make it as big as possible. Taking the initiative to invite the daughters of the officials, how could Zhu Qizhen let go of such an opportunity to blow things up? He naturally had to carry it out. Not only that, he also imagined that when things went wrong he would stand out and clean up the mess with the imperial family's reputation. In this way, even if the other officials pleaded for leniency, he would only ask for a fine of silver and not a change in his official position. The others wouldn't be able to say anything. Zhu Qizhen's edict reached the various residences. For a moment, everyone was in a state of chaos. It seemed that they wouldn't have the chance to avoid this muddy water even if they wanted to. Tell Yang Qindong to be careful. The Minister of Works, Shi Pu, said to his butler. This isn't an easy job. Tell him to be careful. The Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhuo, pondered in his study. In the end he still decided to remind Yang Qindong. Sai, young people should still be cautious. How about this, Changning, you will personally make a trip? The Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao, sighed in his study. This meant that he had already approved of the marriage between Yang Qindong and his granddaughter, Hu Yan. The Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, was even more direct. His grandson, Wang Si, directly left the capital and went to the Yang family manor. The four ministers, as well as the assistant ministers and officials below the third rank, had sent people to remind Yang Qindong in various ways. They had also more or less received benefits from Yang Qindong in various aspects. If they were officials who had some friendship with Yang Qindong in the past, they would not be able to do anything. Chapter 117. This was the so-called aristocratic group. When something happened, it was natural for them to band together. Regardless of whether it was to help each other or because they were intimately interdependent, at least 1/3 of the officials in the capital participated in this matter and issued a kind warning to Yang Qindong. This time even Wang Zhen sent a eunuch to warn him. He even personally sent Mao Mu, the eunuch of the ceremony supervisor, to the Yang family manor. Dong Shui eunuch Wang said that this time the emperor is really angry and will definitely teach you a lesson. No matter how good the third princess birthday banquet is, he will still express his dissatisfaction. Mao Mu looked carefully at Yang Qindong. Because of Yang Qindong, Mao Mu was no longer the eunuch who was looked down upon by others. He had his own power and had a group of followers and a certain amount of power in the entire palace. Humans were like this. Before they had power they might be able to live a peaceful life. But once they had power, they would only seek greater things and be more afraid of losing them. Mao Mu knew very well in his heart that he could be where he was today because of who gave him everything. He also knew that everything he had now was completely within the power of this person to take back. Because of this, his respect for Yang Qindong came from the bottom of his heart. It was the loyalty of a servant to his master. Knowing that his situation had long been tied to Dong Shui's, Mao Mu spoke with a bit of caution and anxiety. When he spoke, he naturally considered it from Dong Shui's point of view. Yang Qindong could sense Mao Mu's worry and anxiety, which made him feel very gratified. At the same time he stepped forward and patted Mao Mu's shoulder. This young master knows all that you have said. But since it has already happened, what we need to think about now is how to change the situation and not escape from it. Do you understand? How about this, I'll help you with something. Yang Qindong smiled. At this moment he was as confident as a general who commanded thousands of troops before a great war. As the third princess' birthday approached, the atmosphere in the entire imperial palace seemed to have become much more tense. However, unlike the others, Princess Changde, who was the protagonist, did not feel it at all. Instead, her face was filled with anticipation, looking forward to what kind of surprise Dong Shui would bring her. Third princess, a eunuch called Mao Mu is looking for you. He said that the East Marshal has something important to discuss with you. You see. Her personal maid walked to Princess Changde's side and whispered into her ear. Dong Shui is looking for me? Princess Changde's face was filled with astonishment. She could not understand why this Yang Qindong was looking for her when her birthday had not yet arrived. Yes, this eunuch Mao also said that if the princess doesn't agree to see him, she will definitely regret it. When the maidservant thought of the 100 taels of silver she had just received, she tried her best to put in a good word for Mao Mu. To be honest, it was just a eunuch who wanted to see the princess. She actually gave him 100 taels of silver as a reward. This silver was too easy to earn. The innocent third princess nodded curiously. Arrange for him to come in. But remember, don't let anyone else see him. Having been in the imperial palace since young, she naturally knew that it was difficult to keep any secrets here. Although eunuchs were everywhere in the imperial harem, this eunuch Mao was someone sent by the East Marshal. Naturally, he was different from others. Once he was discovered, who knew what kind of waves it would cause? Yes, princess. Don't worry, I will definitely not let anyone else see you. Afraid that her 100 taels of silver would fly away, the maidservant said with a resolute face. What would come in the end. Under the attention of many people, the third princess' birthday finally arrived. On this day, the imperial palace seemed to be much livelier. With the intention of making a big deal out of this matter, Zhu Qizhen deliberately made the entire imperial palace know about this matter. He also specially issued an edict that the eunuchs and maidservants of each palace, as long as they were not on duty, could come to join in the fun and see the difference and uniqueness between the East Marshal and others. In the morning, after the court, the daughters of the ministers began to line up to enter the imperial palace. From afar, the number of people was at least 500. This was because maids were not allowed to enter the imperial palace. Otherwise, there would be more people. But even so, with such influence and scale, it was likely that no matter what happened, it would be clearly known to all the officials. Yang Duo and Hu Yen were also in the crowd, lining up to enter the imperial palace. By right, Yang Duo was already married and was not qualified to attend the third princess banquet. But because she was a member of the Yang family, she was specially approved. At this time she was walking together with Hu Yen, but no matter how one looked at it, the two of them looked a little anxious. The environment could affect a person. They were both born in the families of important ministers, so their sensitivity to some things was naturally incomparable to that of ordinary people. They could clearly feel that this banquet would not be a good one, and the wine would not be good. But compared to the other people who were more interested in watching the show, they were more worried about Yang Qindong. Although the matter between Hu Yen and Yang Qindong was not made public as the seventh sister, Yang Duo naturally knew about it. When she saw that Hu Yen, who had always been playful and cute, was trembling nervously at the moment, she couldn't help but gently tug at her arm and said with a smile, "What's wrong? You haven't married yet, but you're already worried about your future husband?" Hu Yen, who was originally very nervous, immediately blushed when Yang Duo said this. "Seventh sister, could it be that you're not worried about Dong Shuai? My grandfather said that this time, it is clearly the emperor who is looking for trouble with Dong Shuai." How could Yang Duo not know the importance of this matter? Even at home, her husband, Wang Go, who had been well behaved for a while, recently jumped up again. Especially that evil mother-in-law Yan Shi, who was full of sarcastic remarks. Looking at her attitude, it was as if her sixth brother had already been given the cold shoulder by the emperor. Although she said that she was worried, Yang Duo knew that this was not the time to panic. Otherwise, before the emperor did anything, Dong Shuai would have problems first. Don't worry, could it be that you don't have any confidence in Dong Shuai? I have confidence, but this time it is the emperor. Hu Yen still wanted to continue explaining. It's good that you have confidence. Yang Duo directly interrupted. Since you have confidence, then let's see how your Dong Shuai will create a miracle. Originally, Hu Yan's face was full of worry, but after hearing Yang Duo's words, she calmed down a lot for no reason. Then her steps became much firmer. She was looking forward to Dong Shuai's wonderful performance in her heart. Compared to the nervousness of others, the main character, Yang Qindong, was very calm, at least on the surface. When the time came, he strode into the inner palace of the imperial city under the lead of a steward eunuch. This was also his first time here. His face was full of curiosity, looking left and right as if he was here for a vacation. This also caused the steward eunuch to be secretly amazed. Everyone said that Dong Shuai was very capable. Although he wasn't too clear, at least his ability to maintain his composure was incomparable to others. He still remembered the first time he entered the palace, his face was full of anxiety and nervousness. How could he dare to be as natural as Dong Shuai? Dong Shuai. The palace in front is where Princess Shangde rests. Today's birthday banquet will also be held there. Seeing that they were almost there, the steward eunuch reminded Yang Qindong in a small voice. Okay, thank you for your hard work. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, revealing a confident smile. Like magic, he took out a large piece of silver from his sleeve and casually handed it over. This was the biggest piece of silver. One piece was worth 20 taels. After the steward eunuch took it in his hand, he smiled like a flower and said, "Then I wish Dong Shuai all the best." "Ah, good. Thank you for your auspicious words." Yang Qindong laughed heartily, then quickened his steps, as if he didn't know that there was a battlefield in front of him, and that there was some beautiful scenery waiting for him. Yang Qindong arrived just an hour before the other daughters of the officials. This was also specially arranged by Zhu Qizhen. He didn't want to give Dong Shuai too much time to react and watch him make a fool of himself. After rushing to Princess Shangda's palace, Yang Qindong saw the main character of today's banquet, the third princess. When the gorgeously dressed third princess saw Yang Qindong, her face revealed an unnoticeable smile, then she went forward to greet him generously, giving others the feeling that it was the first time they had met. In fact, this was also the first time the two of them had officially met, but in private they had been friends for a long time. Yang Qindong greets Princess Shangda. "Long live the princess." After saying this, Yang Qindong was about to kneel on the ground. Instead, it was the third princess who stepped forward and said, "Yang Shima, you don't have to be so polite. You still have to work hard today." Yang Qindong, who didn't kneel, raised his head to look carefully at the third princess. He found that this girl was indeed very beautiful, and her skin was also very good. However, those eyes of hers seemed to be moving too quickly, giving people the feeling that she was too mischievous. Thinking that this was only a girl who had just turned 14 years old, and that playfulness was in her nature, Yang Qindong didn't want to dwell on this matter. Instead, he lowered his head and replied respectfully, in reply to the princess, "It's not hard for this official to work for His Majesty and the princess. Oh right, in a while this official will arrange for some people and things to be brought into the palace. I hope the princess can make things convenient." Of course. This princess has already made the arrangements. Yang Shima, please rest assured. The third princess smiled and nodded in agreement. Since everything was left to Yang Qindong to arrange, then of course the people and things he prepared would be brought into the palace. Otherwise, what kind of tricks could a man like him come up with? After a simple greeting, Yang Qindong walked around the palace accompanied by a few eunuchs. He needed to take care of the environment and find a good spot. At least, he would know how to place the things and people he had arranged when they arrived. Chapter 118. The eunuchs who followed him were all doing their best. When they faced Yang Qindong, they all had a flattering look on their faces. They had all received 500 taels of silver from eunuch Mao Mu in advance. How could they not do their best now? With everyone's cooperation, Yang Qindong soon had a good idea of the arrangements for the various locations. In fact, he had already gotten the blueprint of the palace before. Now he just needed to walk around in the real world and confirm the final location. 4 hours later, the people and things arranged were all in place. More than 500 daughters of officials who came to watch the ceremony also came to the palace. They were scattered within the range of their activities, chatting in groups of 3 or 5. It seemed that everything was ready. Finally, a sharp shout came, "The Emperor and the Empress Dowager are here." Soon the whole place became quiet. Zhu Qizhen, who was dressed in a dragon robe, walked to the courtyard of Princess Changda's palace, surrounded by Empress Qian and a group of concubines. They sat in the seats arranged by Yang Qindong. There were too many people. Ordinary palaces could not accommodate them. Fortunately, it was the end of April, the beginning of May. The daytime weather in the capital was still very pleasant. Since they were all arranged in the courtyard, no one had any objections. In the courtyard, everyone was in place. Yang Qindong, the organizer and planner, was also watching all this from a corner. When he saw that even the emperor and empress were present, he smiled and nodded slightly to Madame Shui, who was not far away. Madame Shui got Yang Qindong's hint and said loudly, "The birthday celebration of Princess Shangda officially begins. Please enjoy the first program, the opening dance, Happy Birthday Song." As soon as Madame Shui finished speaking, a group of 14 or 15 years old girls ran out from the corner of the palace. They all wore short skirts that exposed their knees. They were young and lively and ran out separately. The sudden appearance of so many people caused everyone present to be shocked at first, but when they saw these beautiful girls, whose average age was only between 13 and 16 years old, go straight to the third princess's side and surround her, after being surprised, they all revealed expressions of understanding. Needless to say, this must have been arranged by Dong Shuai. Sure enough, it was different. This opening was completely different from the previous ones. The sudden appearance of dozens of beautiful girls also shocked Zhu Qizhen, who was just about to find fault with the situation. Originally, he wanted to express his dissatisfaction in the first program and was prepared to give Yang Qindong a show of strength. But unexpectedly he was shocked by the exposed white thighs. In the entire scene there were only two real men. One was him and the other was Dong Shui Yang Qindong. Naturally, Yang Qindong had already seen these leggings countless times, so he was already immune to them and used to them. Zhu Qizhen was different. Although he had many concubines in his harem, they were usually dignified and beautiful in consideration of their status. Who would dare to wear such clothes in front of him? Naturally, he was shocked by this sudden sight. He was so shocked that he completely forgot about finding fault with him. In contrast, Princess Changde, who was surrounded by the girls, was very happy. She only knew in advance that there would be such an opening dance that required her cooperation. When the time came, she only needed to follow these girls and walk around the field. But she never thought that it would be such a big scene, especially the clothes they were wearing. They were so beautiful that they could show off their beauty completely. It made her want to wear one of them. According to the previous agreement, after being surrounded by the beautiful girls, Princess Changde followed them from the stage to the field. Then the sound of guzhing and pipa sounded. After a prelude that no one had heard before, Madame Shui walked on the field in person. She bowed slightly to the third princess, and then sang a beautiful song. There is always a song on the road of growth. It's a happy birthday song. With our growth, it's a familiar song. Holding your hand, I want to sing a happy birthday song with you. Today is your birthday. I just want to tell you that today is your birthday. I wrote a song for you. You and I are in the song. I'm so happy. This birthday song of Lu Mingzhe was not famous even in the future, but it was suitable for today's occasion. Yang Qindong had searched in the big warehouse for a long time before he found this song. As soon as the song was played, it immediately excited the audience. It was a new song that no one had heard at all, and it was so relevant. No one could think of any reason to object. Even Zhu Qizhen had long wanted to make things difficult for Yang Qindong, but at this moment he really couldn't find a better reason to do so. He could only look on with hope and find a way to hold Yang Qindong accountable in the next step. From his investigation of Yang Qindong, he had come to the conclusion that although he was very good at composing songs, especially new ones, they were usually inspirational and emotional. However, it was clear that this kind of song was not suitable for the occasion of the princess' birthday. When the time came, Zhu Qizhen would be able to find a reason to punish Yang Qindong. The happy birthday song ended with the accompaniment of the girls. Following that, a different kind of music began to play. Zhu Qizhen's eyes lit up. As the heavy melody played, Princess Changde's expression changed from one of joy to one of seriousness. At some point, Mu Lily, the former procuress of the 100 Flowers Hall and one of the stewards of the immortal abode, was standing beside the third princess. Mu Lily had already become a woman from a good family. Following the introduction of the melody, she suddenly opened her mouth and sang in a mezzo-soprano voice, "Thinking of your back, I feel your tenacity. Touching your hands, I feel your hardships. Unknowingly, white hair has appeared on your temples. Silently, wrinkles have appeared at the corners of your eyes. My old father. The person I dote on the most." The song Old Father took the stage. When she sang about "my old father, the person I dote on the most," Princess Changde also sang along with her, her expression full of deep emotion. She was using this song to tell everyone that she was reminiscing about her father, Ming Xuanzong Zhuzhanji. Originally, this kind of song was more suitable for a man to sing. For example, Yang Qindong, who had been controlling everything from the shadows, was an extremely suitable person. However, after some consideration he gave up on the idea of doing it himself. Firstly, if he openly appeared in a place filled with women other than the emperor, it would easily cause trouble. Secondly, no matter how good Ming Xuanzong Zhuzhanji was, he wasn't his father. Why should he stand out and sing for someone else? If Yang Qindong didn't come out to sing, Princess Changde definitely wouldn't be able to complete the song. If she forced herself to sing, it would only cause the meaning to change. Thus he chose Mu Lily. This former courtesan had experienced many things, and her voice carried a trace of vicissitudes. She was just the right person to sing the song. Thus the scene in front of them was born. Mu Lily sang the lead and Princess Changde sang the key words, completing the song. The reason why she had to sing Old Father was because in the past dynasties, the emperors usually ruled the world with benevolence and filial piety. Without a father, how could a child be born? Once this song was played, it was really just to fit the situation. At least, once this song was played, Zhu Qizhen, who had been finding fault with it, couldn't say anything. After the song Old Father, ended, the melody changed again. Mu Lily left as quietly as she came, and left without attracting anyone's attention. Only Princess Xiangda was left standing in the middle of the field, speaking to the crowd with a trace of sadness in her voice. 14 years ago, my mother gave birth to me on this day. Now that I've grown up, she's truly separated from me forever. As her daughter, I miss her dearly. Now, I'll dedicate the song, Only Mother is Good in the World, to everyone. I also hope that my deceased mother can feel that her daughter misses her. These lines that Yang Qindong had composed quickly resonated with everyone, especially since most of the people present were women. There were even women like Empress Qian who was going to be a mother in the future. Princess Xiangda's words instantly aroused their endless thoughts about their mother. Only mother is good in the world. A child with a mother is like a treasure. Throw yourself into your mother's embrace and you won't be able to enjoy happiness. Princess Xiangda's voice carried a trace of longing and reminiscence, instantly stirring up the emotions of everyone present. Because the lyrics were simple and the melody easy to understand, many people present agreed on the third time. Even Empress Qian's tears flowed freely. When she heard this song, it wasn't difficult for her expression to change. She couldn't help but think of how well her mother had treated her when she was growing up in Haizhou, now Lianyungang, Jiangsu. She immediately tugged at Emperor Zhu Qizhen with her slender hands. Your Majesty, Qinxia Mrs. Mother. All right, after a while, Zhen will arrange for someone to bring her to the capital to accompany you. Zhu Qizhen looked at this Empress Qian, who rarely asked for anything from him, and immediately agreed. The song Only Mother is Good in the World had stirred up everyone's emotions. Most of the daughters of the officials were thinking that when they returned home from the palace later, they would personally accompany their mothers. At the very least, they would have to thank their mothers for their hard work. Everyone's emotions were so affected that no one noticed that a beautiful three-tiered pastry had been pushed to the center of the hall, right next to the birthday girl, Princess Xiangda. Everyone please calm down. Since it's a birthday, how could there not be a birthday cake? Everyone please take a look. This is the birthday cake that our immortal abode has just released. There's cream on top and a soft pastry underneath. It's fragrant, sweet, and delicious. Everyone will be able to taste it in a moment. Before that, there's one more thing to do, and that is to light a candle and make a wish. Madame Xue's voice clearly rang out in the hall, entering everyone's ears. After making a wish and blowing out the candles, the next step was to cut the cake. A suitable knife had already been placed in Princess Xiangda's hands, and pieces of cake of the same size were sliced out. Princess Xiangda even gave the first two pieces to her imperial brother Zhu Qizhen and imperial sister-in-law Empress Qian. The other girls who had come to watch the ceremony were also given a small piece of cake according to their parents' official positions. Because there were so many people to share, a few more large pieces of cake were brought in. Even so, everyone could only eat a small piece. Fortunately, everyone quickly learned from Madame Snow and Mu Lily that the immortal abode was already selling such delicious and beautiful cakes. This wasn't too disappointing. But at the same time, these women also made a decision. When they returned, they would immediately send someone to the immortal abode to buy a cake for them to try. So what if it wasn't her birthday? Who said they couldn't eat something so delicious? The birthday song ended and the cake was divided up. Logically speaking, this birthday banquet was already perfect. At the very least, it was unprecedented. However, in Yang Qindong's eyes, this was far from enough. He knew very well why the emperor had ordered him to host this banquet. It was obviously to make trouble for him. Even though he'd used all sorts of methods and novel things to prevent the emperor from finding an excuse to make trouble for him, there was no such thing as a thief. But there was no such thing as guarding against thieves all day long. He still decided to pay a little to alleviate the pressure the emperor was putting on him. Now it's time to present the gifts. Below is a small token of my appreciation for Princess Xiangda's birthday. Please kindly accept it. As if by magic, a list of gifts appeared in Madame Snow's hands. When she saw that everyone's eyes were on her, including Emperor Zhu Qizhen's, she smiled sweetly and waved her hand. Her voice was as beautiful as an oriole's. To celebrate Princess Xiangda's birthday, Yang Qindong will send 10 mirrors, 50 boxes of transparent glasses, 4 in each box, 100 bottles of perfume, 500 sets of soap, 1,000 pieces of tissue paper. As the singing continued, many eunuchs from the palace carried the items on the list into the field. Soon they were piled up like a small mountain. Emperor Zhu Qizhen, who was standing not far away, saw these things appear in front of him. His originally stern expression finally relaxed. These were all very popular items. Some of them were even sold in limited quantities. They were the kind that could not be bought even if one had money. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were worth hundreds of thousands of taels of silver. Obviously, this was Yang Qindong's attitude. Taking the opportunity of the princess's birthday, he took the initiative to give gifts and benefits to the royal family. In this way, the other officials could not say anything. With these items, whether he used them himself or used them to reward the officials, or even sold them for money, it was all up to him. With these gifts, Zhu Qixin's mood became very good. He also decided not to do anything to Yang Qindong. To put it bluntly, he was the emperor. The world was his. The reason why he targeted Yang Qindong was that he envied him because he saw that he was in the limelight. Now that he had received benefits, of course such thoughts were not so serious. The gifts that were presented naturally surprised the womenfolk. All of them widened their eyes and looked at the birthday girl, Princess Changde, with envy and jealousy. But at this time, as the star of today's ceremony, Princess Changde's eyes were fixed on a small and beautiful box that was not much bigger than a palm. It was a box with a delicate doll on the top. When the switch was flipped, the doll on the box began to rotate and move its limbs, and a song similar to the birthday song slowly sounded. To put it bluntly, this was a very common birthday music box in the future. The market price was only a dozen yuan. However, at this moment, it was undoubtedly the rarest and most precious gift that had appeared here. As soon as the box appeared, especially the function of automatically playing music, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. All the womenfolk looked at the box with admiration and amazement, and there was a strong desire in their eyes. What's this? How can it be so delicate and beautiful? Some women in the crowd could not help but exclaim. Thinking that it was a gift from Dong Shui, they hurriedly asked Madame Shui, who was holding the gift list. Madame Shui was in the limelight today. Although she used to be a top courtesan in the eyes of many people, she was still a lowly existence. Especially in the eyes of these women, she was easily labeled as a vixen, a seductress, or a whore. She might have some reputation in her own home, but when she stood next to the daughters of these officials and dignitaries, she would be hated by everyone. Even in her dreams, Madame Shui had never imagined that one day she would be surrounded by so many nobles. Not only did these women not hate her, they even fought to talk to her. There were even quite a few who expressed their admiration. In the end, this was all because of Dong Shui. At this moment, Madame Shui was even more determined to follow in Dong Shui's footsteps and never leave his side. Yang, she calls this a birthday music box. It can automatically play beautiful music. It's perfect for Princess Changde's birthday, Madame Shui explained to the women with a smile. I wonder if the immortal abode sells such a good thing? After hearing that it was a birthday music box, the women were tempted and eager to know where they could buy such a good thing. Sorry, we don't have it. Under everyone's gaze, Madame Shui shook her head regretfully. As you said, this is a good thing. In fact, Yang Shima had specially sent people to bring it over from the sea. Just for this item, he had spent a total of 30,000 taels of silver. Moreover, this was a priceless item. Our great Ming dynasty only has one. So expensive. It's a little expensive, but compared to its effects, it's not that excessive. When will a man give me such a thing on my birthday? Then I'll be satisfied. That's, she's willing to give herself to him, isn't that right? This girl is in love. Suddenly, all kinds of voices came from the crowd. For a moment, some people even laughed and played together. In the crowd, Hu Yin happened to hear Madame Shui's words. A trace of disappointment flashed across her face. When she saw the birthday music box, she fell in love with it. She was wondering if she could get such a thing on her birthday. But when she heard that there was only one in the entire Great Ming dynasty, she knew that she was dreaming too much. Chapter 120. Compared to the other womenfolk's disappointment, Princess Changde was extremely happy. There was only one such good thing in the entire Great Ming dynasty. This showed the importance of this piece of music. Thus, she became even more curious about Yang Qindong, who gave her this gift. Why did he give her such an expensive gift? Was it only because she was a princess? But what if the other princesses also requested Yang Qindong to hold birthday banquets for them? What would he do? The birthday banquet ended with a small mountain of good things. Next, the womenfolk ate some other food and left the palace in twos and threes to return to their own residences. Hu Yan also took a carriage back to the Hu residence. As soon as she entered, the servant girl Xiao Qing greeted her with a mysterious expression. Miss, quickly go back to your room and take a look. The East Marshal has given you a big box. Big box. The East Marshal gave it to me. Hearing this, Hu Yen couldn't help but quicken her pace and trot back to her room. Then she opened the box with curiosity and excitement. The first thing she saw was a birthday music box that was even bigger than the one Princess Shangda received. On top of the box was a merry-go-round. After the switch was turned, the beautiful melody of a birthday song immediately sounded. Hu Yen was so happy that she couldn't bear to put it down. Miss, what is this? It can actually make its own sound and it's so exquisite. Xiaoqing's voice suddenly sounded behind her. Hu Yen was so frightened that she turned around and covered her mouth. She clearly remembered what Madame Xue had said about this being the only one in the entire Great Ming dynasty. Now there was an even better birthday music box in her hands. Didn't Yang Qindong commit the crime of deceiving the emperor? Xiaoqing, forget everything you saw just now. No matter who asks, you can't say that you've seen such a thing. Do you understand? Hu Yen said very seriously. Xiaoqing was confused. In all her life, this was the first time she had seen her misspeak to her so seriously. After instructing Xiaoqing not to talk nonsense, Hu Yen carried the beautiful music box to the bedside. She opened the quilt and dove in. By doing this, she could prevent the sound from spreading out, and she could enjoy the beautiful sound alone. Of course, the sweetness was still in her heart. Through this matter, she knew that Dong Shuai had her in his heart, which was the happiest thing. While Hu Yen was thinking about Dong Shuai, Yang Qindong had already left the imperial palace and returned to the Yang clan manor. As soon as they entered the manor's inner courtyard, Yang Qindong took off his fifth-rank official robes and said to Tiger's Mane, "Spread the news that I, young master, fell when I fell from my horse and needed to rest for a while." "Young master, did you really fall somewhere?" Tiger's Mane was shocked when he heard the news. He looked closely at Yang Qindong. "You were with him the whole way. When did you see the young master fall off his horse? This is just a way to get some peace and quiet." Yang Qindong smiled bitterly and shook his head. But he also knew that it was because Tiger's Mane was too concerned about him that he lost his basic judgment. Oh. Tiger's Mane smiled foolishly and scratched his head. He nodded and turned to go about his business. Not long after, many people in the capital knew that the sixth young master of the Yang clan fell because he was riding too fast. This matter was passed to Wang Zhen through the brocade guard. He was surprised at first, then shook his head with a smile. He's avoiding trouble. This is also good. It's not a good thing to be too outstanding. It seems that we should let the emperor know. When Wang Zhen went to see Zhu Qizhen and told him about Yang Qindong falling off his horse, the young emperor quickly figured out the crux of the matter. He smiled and said, "It seems that we are too concerned about Yang Qindong. This kind of concern is too much for him to bear. Forget it. Since it's like this, arrange for an imperial physician to take a look. Tell him that we will allow him to rest for a period of time." After holding a birthday banquet and sending gifts, Yang Qindong finally got rid of Zhu Qizhen's concern, and was able to take a breather. He wanted to rest well and do what he wanted to do, but the situation did not allow it. In the 14th year of Zheng Tong, Yeshen, the leader of the Mongolian Wara tribe, sent his younger brother to the capital of the Great Ming dynasty as an envoy. On the surface it was to pay tribute, but in reality, it was to ask for something. When it came to the Wala, there was one person that could not be avoided. He was the leader of the Wala, Yeshen. In the 3rd year of Zheng Tong, the escaped Atai Khan was captured and killed by Tua Huan. The Mongolian plateau was reunited in the hands of the Wala. At this point, Tua Huan laid the foundation for his son, Yeshen. After Tua Huan passed away, Yeshen succeeded the throne. After Yeshen succeeded the throne, he called himself the imperial tutor, King Huai. All the tribes of the Wala submitted to Yeshen. As Yeshen's power and influence grew, the Tatar chief's title of Great Khan became an empty title. He could no longer restrain Yeshen. The Wara would pay tribute to the Ming dynasty every year. Tua Buhua and Yeshen, the ruler and subject, both sent envoys to the Ming dynasty. At this time, it was clear that Yeshen did not need to listen to Tua Buhua's instructions. At this point, the relationship between the Tartars and the Wala was similar to the current relationship between North and South Korea. As Yeshen was a cunning Wala leader, he was not as honest as the other Mongols. Instead, he was as cunning as a rabbit. As time went on, the power of the Tartars became smaller and smaller. Not long later, he controlled the Tartars and conquered Yulanhar, unifying the 3 Mongol tribes. On the grasslands, the Wala slowly became the strongest. After unifying the Mongols, Vachi wanted to restore De Yuan and unify the country. As a result, he harassed the Ming dynasty and became a huge problem in the north. Wang Jin used power. Not only did he not strengthen the border, but he also accepted bribes from Vachi and smuggled goods with the Vachi nobles. For the sake of profits, Wang Zhen asked his best friend, Guijing, to make large amounts of arrows and give them to Vachi. Vachi would return good horses to Wang Zhen as a form of repayment. To get on the good side of Vachi, Wang Zhen also treated the envoys well and rewarded them. Ever since Vachi established a tribute relationship with the Ming dynasty, he would send envoys to the Ming dynasty with good horses and other goods. The Ming dynasty government would reward the envoys accordingly. Under normal circumstances, the reward would slightly exceed the value of the tribute. At the same time, the envoys had to be rewarded as well. As a result, Vachi was very willing to pay tribute to the Ming dynasty in order to obtain the wealth of the Central Plains. According to the original rules, Vachi could not send more than 50 envoys to the Ming dynasty each year. Later on, Vachi's greed for the rewards from the Ming dynasty grew, and the number of envoys increased day by day. For example, this time, the periodical king had brought a group of 2,500 envoys. In order to receive more rewards, he had falsely reported that it was 3,000 people. As soon as he entered the capital, the name he heard the most from the Walla spies in the capital was Yang Qindong. In the capital, when Yang Qindong was mentioned, the immortal abode had to be mentioned. The periodical king brought Captain Tuj Er's group of 5 to this place, which was known as the most delicious and fun place in the capital. If one hadn't entered the immortal abode, they wouldn't have known that people could still live like this. The delicacies here were things they had never tasted before, the music they had never heard before, the drinks and desserts they had never seen before, and even the chess and cards they had never heard of before. He only wanted to come here to try the fresh food before leaving. Who would have thought that after entering this place in the afternoon, he would only leave reluctantly when it was time to close for the curfew. Even then he still looked like he had not had enough of it. After half a day, when Tujer went to pay the bill, he found that they had spent a total of 120 taels of silver. They hadn't even had a chance to play, but they had already spent so much money. If they tried everything, they probably wouldn't even have enough silver in their pockets to pay the bill. When the group of 5 returned to the relay station, the periodical king still had a look of reminiscence on his face. Let's go there early tomorrow and find a good place to play for another day. This place is much better than our great steppe. General, the immortal abode isn't a good place, but it isn't a place we can afford to spend money on. We haven't even eaten anything today. 120 taels of silver is gone just like that. Tuj stood off to the side with a pained expression. What? Is that expensive? The periodical king's expression changed when he heard this. However, he immediately began to laugh loudly. I didn't expect the immortal abode to make so much money. Haha, then this general must meet this Yang Jima. General wants to meet that eastern commander? Tuj didn't understand what the periodical king meant. He wore an unfathomable smile on his face. Correct. This general wants to bring him business and give him a chance to make a lot of money. Ah. Tuj didn't quite understand the periodical king's intentions, but since the general had said so, he had no choice but to make the arrangements. There weren't many people in Walla who were smarter than the general. As the captain of the guards, he was quite confident in this. Just like that, the next morning, a group of uninvited guests arrived outside the Yang clan manor. The guests didn't come in a soft sedan like the great Ming dynasty's officials. Instead, they came on large horses. They were dressed in the attire of a different race, and the blades at their waists hung unabashedly at their sides. It was as if they would draw their blades at the slightest disagreement. The periodical king purposely brought a group of 20 guards with him to the Yang clan manor. Their formation was quite impressive, causing Yang Wu, who was on duty, to frown. However, when Yang Qindong was training them, he had trained them to be courageous. He didn't seem to be afraid in the slightest. Instead, he boldly stood in front of the group and shouted, "This place belongs to the Crown Prince's steward, Sir Yang." Halt. The group naturally stopped. As the captain of the guards, Tuj naturally went up to welcome them. With an arrogant expression, he shouted at Yang Wu, "Hurry up and inform your master that the periodical king of the Walla has arrived. Hurry up and come out to welcome him." Chapter 121. So the general has come to visit. Please wait for a moment and let my master know. Yang Wu cupped his fist and said politely. After that, he turned around and walked into the manor. However, the wooden door did not open and remained closed. General this. Seeing that Yang Lin did not have the intention to invite them in, Tuager's face was filled with anger. It's fine. We are new here and this East Marshal has lived in the southern part of the Ming dynasty since he was young. It's normal that he doesn't know about us. As long as someone reports to him, he will meet us. The magazine king had a confident look on his face. Over the years, Walla had become stronger under the leadership of his brother, Yes Hen. Under his overflowing confidence, he looked down on the officials of the Ming dynasty more and more. They were a bunch of people who only knew how to talk. What kind of ability could they have? Moreover, the person he was going to face was only a fifth-rank official. He really did not care about him. Jianghu came to the inner courtyard of the Yang Manor and told the young master Yang Qindong about the magazine king's visit. Then he stood respectfully at the side and waited. Wallace people? Yang Qindong laughed. He knew about the changes in the Tuma castle from history. Naturally, he had to know about Walla. After knowing that it was the magazine king who came, he did not have the slightest intention of meeting him. They were about to become opponents. If he were to get close to him, it would be hard to avoid attention. This was not what he wanted. Tiger's Mane, go and send them away. You should know what to do. Since becoming the head of the Security Bureau, Tiger's Mane had a clearer understanding of the outside world. He was very clear about what kind of power Walla had and what kind of people they were. He was also very clear about the attitude of the imperial court towards them. Now that Yang Qindong said this, he immediately understood and nodded. Young master, don't worry. Leave everything to me. After making his promise to Yang Qindong, Tiger's Mane and Yang Wu walked out of the inner courtyard of the Yang residence while arranging for someone to report to the head of the eunuchs, Wang Zhen. No matter what, the other party had appeared as an emissary. If they didn't handle it well, it would be a diplomatic matter between the two countries. The matter might escalate, so they had to report it to the higher-ups. The staff of the Security Bureau quickly left the Yangjia village through a small path and headed straight for the capital. Tiger's Mane and Yang Wu also walked to the outer gate and stood in front of the Walla emissary and his entourage. Greetings, Envoy Walla. Tiger's Mane greeted politely as soon as he approached. As the second-in-command of Yang Qindong's organization, Tiger's Mane naturally had the aura of a superior as time passed. When he came from afar, he had never seen Yang Qindong. He thought that the person who came was the main character of the competition. He was about to return the greeting, but when he heard that the other party was just a servant, his eyes flashed with anger. No matter what, he was Walla's general and the younger brother of Chief Yes Hen. This time, he had already condescended to come to the Yangjia village. If Yang Qindong didn't come out and only sent a servant, how could he keep his face? After Tiger's Mane reported his identity, he didn't look at the other party's ugly expression and said directly, Envoy Walla, my lord was injured a few days ago when he was riding a horse. He is now recuperating in bed. It is really inconvenient for him to meet you. Please understand. Injured? That's good. There are too many warriors on the grassland who get injured while riding a horse. I have good medicine to treat injuries. Let me see if the East Marshal's injury is better. How could the tournament king not see that this was just an excuse? He wanted to expose it on the spot. Finding a reason to refuse the other party instead of directly refusing to meet him was giving the other party face. However, the tournament king didn't know when to back down. Tiger's Mane's face changed slightly and said, This is not good. You are the envoy of Walla. My lord is an important official in the court. It's better not to meet in private to avoid unnecessary trouble. Tiger's Mane repeatedly stopped him, but it angered the guard captain, Tugger. In his eyes, the general coming to the Yangjia village was giving enough face. Yang Qindong didn't want face, so he couldn't blame him for speaking rudely. Haha, it's really a joke. He is just an idle official. The crown prince of the Ming dynasty is still a baby. What's the use of washing horses? How can he become an important official? It's really funny to stick gold on his face like this. Tugger looked up to the sky and laughed, causing the guards following him to also laugh. Swoosh. A murderous aura rushed out with Yang Wu as the center, and rushed forward at a rapid speed. He clenched his fists and glared angrily, as if he was going to start a massacre at any time. Stop. Tiger's Mane was the first to feel the murderous aura. He quickly used a voice that only the two of them could hear to stop it. Someone dared to slander the young master. As a subordinate, of course he was furious. However, the person in front of him wasn't a nobody. He was the envoy of Walla. If they were all killed here, the consequences would be far beyond what they could bear. Moreover, the matter had already been reported to Wang Zhen. Presumably, there would be people coming to the Yangzhou village soon. If they came and saw a ground full of corpses, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves even if they had 1,000 mouths. After stopping Jianghu and telling him to stop, Hu Mang's expression darkened. Whether or not my lord is an important official of the court is not something a mere guard captain like you can judge. You don't have the qualifications to do so. Please pay attention to your words and actions. Don't provoke any displeasure because of a slip of the tongue. If there are any consequences because of this, I'm afraid you will have to bear it alone. However, I don't know if a small guard like you is able to bear it. He had just said that His Excellency was not an important official, and here he was being looked down upon as a guard. Tuogu immediately looked at Hu Mang with a face full of resentment. You look down on a guard like this, then you should be very capable, right? However, 1,000 words can't compare to a fight. I just don't know if you have the guts to do so. Tugger rolled up his sleeves, intentionally revealing his thick and strong arms. When he looked at Tiger's mane, he was eager to fight. As the guard captain of the competition king, he was naturally a person with outstanding skills. This was also what he was most proud of. Now that he was showing his strongest side, Tugger was full of confidence. He was even prepared to beat Tiger's mane up until he was looking for his teeth on the ground if he agreed. The Walla were a Mongolian people in the west. They grew up on horses, and fighting bravely was one of the ways they usually solved problems. The tall and sturdy Tugger intentionally revealed the muscles on his arms and looked at Tiger's mane provocatively. However, he didn't know that this performance made him look like a clown in the eyes of others. Tiger's mane and the first batch of Lung Feng were all taught by Yang Qindong. Unlike many other martial arts that were just for show, what he taught was more about killing people. In Yang Qindong's words, war has always been cruel. It won't take care of you just because you're on the side of justice. Similarly, it won't ignore your weakness because you're on the right side. In the end, a real war is about killing and being killed. How to protect yourself while killing is the most important thing. As for other things, they are just fleeting clouds. Under such guidance, Tiger's mane and the others were taught killing moves. The goal of their training was to inflict the greatest damage to the opponent in the shortest amount of time and suppress the opponent's strength and ability. Tugger was just like this. Although he was tall and sturdy, he mostly relied on strength to fight. He was particular about defeating 10 people with strength. If this kind of person was to fight against a brute, he would have a huge advantage. However, when facing the agile Lung Feng members who knew the structure of the human body and knew the weaknesses of the human body, he was too far behind. If they really fought, the opponent only needed to reveal a small flaw, and Tiger's mane would strike with lightning speed and kill the opponent directly. In this way, Tugger's arrogance was like a clown in Tiger's mane's eyes. Naturally, he would ignore him. Tiger's mane's disregard in Tugger's eyes, he thought that the other party was afraid. He laughed maniacally like a general who had already won the battle. When he thought that his momentum had shocked Tiger's mane and the others, he gave a look to his subordinates and prepared to break into the Yang family manner. Just when Tugger thought that he had the situation under control and wanted to perform well in front of his master, the tournament king, he suddenly heard the sound of horse hooves. Then, behind them, a group of about 50 Iron Cloak guards wearing flying suits approached from afar. The sudden appearance of the Ming dynasty's brocade guards forced Tugger, who was about to make a move, to stand still. He even intentionally glanced at General Wang beside him. Don't be afraid. We didn't do anything wrong. Even if the Ming dynasty's emperor came, what can he do? The tournament king said arrogantly. Just from this sentence, it could be seen that in Walla's bones, they clearly looked down on the Ming dynasty's army and even the Ming dynasty's ruler, Ming Yingzong Zhu Qixin. Speaking of which, it wasn't that the Walla were arrogant. In fact, in this world, the strong were respected. Just like the Ming dynasty's Emperor Qingzu's 5 expeditions to the Mongols, the Walla at that time were very respectful to the Ming dynasty. However, in these years, the Ming dynasty had changed 3 emperors and no longer fought with the Walla. As time passed, they forgot how powerful the Ming dynasty was. This was a good example of the saying, weak countries have no diplomacy. Tiger's mane had already seen through Tugger's arrogance and their intention to make a move. In order to ensure the young master's absolute safety, he had already made a gesture when no one was paying attention. No one knew that not far away Yang Qindong's personal guard, Dao Xiao, had been paying attention to all the movements here. Even the safety of the Type 95 in their hands was unlocked and a silencer was installed. They were only waiting for an order to quickly eliminate the Walla team that came to provoke the Yang family manor. Chapter 122. This was the huge difference between modern weaponry and cold weaponry. It was able to quietly finish off the opponent. Although there might be some trouble afterwards, as long as the scene was cleaned up, even if there were suspicions, there would be nothing they could do if they couldn't find any evidence. But before Tiger's man could give the order, the embroidered uniform guard had already arrived. This speed was enough to show just how important Yang Qindong was to Wang Zhen. As expected, there were no eternal friends, only eternal interests. After investing so much money into the immortal abode, if anyone wanted to harm the East Marshal, Wang Zhen's attitude would be the first thing they would have to deal with. The embroidered uniform guard had arrived, led by a Jianghu official who was also Wang Zhen's trusted aide, Tang Tong. The order that Tang Tong received was to bring the tile emissaries back to the capital. She also strictly ordered the soldiers guarding the city gates to not allow them to leave the city as they pleased. They were also not allowed to appear in the Yangzhe manor a second time and cause trouble. After receiving this order, Tang Tong rode over with his men. When he saw that the Walla emissaries were still pacing back and forth outside the gates of the Yang clan manor, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. Soon after, he rushed over with a look of disgust on his face. Tang Tong, who had more than double the number of people, immediately took control of the situation. First he surrounded Tuj and the others. Then, with a stern face, he sternly said, "You came to my Ming dynasty with the status of a vassal state to pay tribute, so you should abide by the rules here. How can you leave the capital without asking for permission and come to the residence of Lord Yang? Just what are you trying to do?" This Tang Tong actually had some tricks up his sleeve. At the very least, he knew how to gain the upper hand by a show of strength. According to the rules, emissaries could enjoy a certain amount of freedom when entering another country, but only within a certain range. If they wanted to go beyond this range, they had to report it. But because the envoys from Vala came every year as time passed, no one really paid attention to this rule. But this didn't mean that it didn't exist. At the very least, Tang Tong's words were reasonable, and Tuj didn't know how to respond. He could only look at the magazine king to see his master's opinion. The periodical king saw that the embroidered uniform guards had arrived not long after he arrived. He knew that this Yang Qindong's power was not small. Since he wasn't prepared enough and had overstepped his boundaries, he wouldn't be able to gain anything by staying here. This general only saw that the scenery here was not bad and couldn't help but come here. Since the Ming dynasty has rules, then let's just go back. To everyone's surprise, the magazine king compromised. His attitude was extremely sincere, as if he had really come here casually. After saying this, he was the first to turn and return to the capital, Tuj and the other guards hurriedly following. Soon they disappeared from everyone's sight, which caught Tang Tong off guard. As one of Wang Zhen's confidants, he naturally knew his master's attitude towards Walla. In the past, every time he came to pay tribute, he would give his master a lot of gold and silver. But this time he didn't bring any gifts, either because he forgot or because of other reasons. This already made his master a little unhappy. This time, Tang Tong came here with the intention of making things difficult for the magazine king and reminding him. But he didn't expect that the magazine king would leave so straightforwardly. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even have the slightest intention of confronting him, which made Tang Tong unable to find a place to say anything. Tang Tong was a little dissatisfied that the matter was resolved so easily. This should have been an opportunity to perform meritorious deeds, but now he missed it. He was unhappy, but he didn't say anything to Tiger's mane. He only said that if anyone came to the Yang family manor to cause trouble in the future, he should send someone to inform him and he would deal with it. Then he turned and left with the embroidered uniform guards. After Tiger's mane saw Tang Tong and the others off, he returned to the manor and reported everything to Yang Qindong in detail. Yang Qindong listened to Tiger's mane's report with a calm expression. After a while he nodded and said, "I understand. After this incident, the magazine king probably won't come to the Yang family manor to cause trouble. However, he won't give up so easily. Inform the immortal abode and sky beyond sky to be more careful. Tell Yangtze to be more alert. At the same time, send Dao Xiao's second squad over just in case." "Young master, now that Dao Xiao's second squad has left, there's only Qiu V's first squad left. If anything happens, your safety," Tiger's mane said with some worry. "This young master's safety is naturally not an issue. Something really happens, don't I still have you guys? Besides, even if something really does happen, it's not like you don't know this young master's strength. If you want to touch me, who knows if there's anyone in the world who can do it." Yang Qindong's voice was filled with confidence. With his ability to enter the warehouse at any time, and even have a helicopter appear at any time, anyone who wanted to capture him would have to be willing. Otherwise, even an entire army wouldn't be able to do anything to him. But young master. Although Tiger's Mane was filled with confidence in Yang Chendong, he didn't want to see the young master take any risks. He asked carefully, "Young master, we've already completed our initial preparations in the capital. Much of the work has already begun, but we're still lacking manpower. Do you think it's possible to transfer some people over from Crimson City? This is also for the sake of better future development." Yang Chendong wasn't someone who couldn't listen to other people's opinions. On the contrary, he always believed that there was a limit to a person's wisdom. Only by gathering the wisdom of the masses could many things be done more perfectly. "Okay, we'll do as you say. Transfer a company of Cold Vanguard from Crimson City, as well as the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad." Yang Chendong naturally had his own considerations for transferring the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad over. Seeing that it wouldn't be long before the Tumu Castle incident happened, if they didn't have enough strength, they wouldn't be able to perform perfectly in many things. Hearing that he could transfer 100 Cold Vanguard and even the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad, Tiger's Mane's face lit up with joy. He let out a long sigh of relief and hurriedly agreed, turning around to make arrangements. Back to the Competition King. Yangjia Village's fruitless return made him extremely annoyed. He originally thought that a small Ming Dynasty rank 5 official would feel honored and open the door to welcome him and treat him as a guest. Didn't people say that the Han people were a nation of etiquette? However, why did Yang Chendong not want to see him at all? Even after knowing that he had appeared, he immediately informed the genie guards. Why did he draw the line between them and be so careful? Was this his careful nature? Or did he feel something? The current Ming Dynasty and Walla's relationship wasn't bad, at least on the surface. As for deep down, although his brother Yeshen had the intention to swallow up the Ming Dynasty and was even preparing in the dark, what kind of secret matter was that? Even in Walla, very few people knew about it. Could Yang Chendong see that something was wrong? He had a guilty conscience, and everyone he saw was a guilty conscience. This was the Competition King's thoughts. It was precisely because the Vara clan was about to make a move that he didn't give Wang Jin any gifts as usual when he came to the Ming Dynasty to pay tribute. Since they were about to become enemies, there was no point in giving anything. Even this time's tribute was to deceive the Ming Dynasty and prepare for the Walla surprise attack. Currently, the Ming Dynasty seemed to know nothing about this. At the very least, there was no change in how they were received. Even the officials of the Ming Dynasty's Ministry of Rites were chatting and laughing as usual. This wasn't something that could be faked. Everything was normal. Only Yang Chendong's behavior was so unapproachable. The Competition King couldn't help but think too much about it. How about this? Take some people to the Shinny residence and find out how this Eastern commander is going to deal with it. The Competition King felt that he still needed to investigate Yang Chendong and see how he could deal with it. Since he couldn't go to the Yang family village, then he'd go to the Immortal Abode. Yes. Tuagura was feeling gloomy. Today's matter had made him lose face, but when he heard the general's orders, he was unable to contain his joy. He didn't have much ability to deal with things peacefully, but when it came to causing trouble, it couldn't be any easier. It was a good opportunity to vent his anger and let the Eastern commander know what the consequences of angering the Walla were. The Immortal Abode was bustling with people and business was booming. Even the ordinary tables in the main hall were in short supply. If one wanted to eat here without a membership card or a reservation, they would often have to line up outside to experience the treatment and conditions. Sometimes, when business was booming, even lining up didn't mean anything. Often, when it was time to close, there were still many cases of people not being able to get in line. Even so, there were still many people who flocked to this place like a flock of ducks. They would rather line up, even if they didn't know whether or not they'd be able to get in line. This scene made the other restaurants and inns incredibly envious. However, their financial strength was far from enough. They did not have fresh songs and dances, nor did they have the unique taste of delicious delicacies. They also did not have transparent glass, unique private rooms and well-trained service staff who were very skilled in dealing with people and had different styles. The hardware and software weren't on the same level. Even when the other restaurants saw how popular the Immortal Abode was, they couldn't think of anything else other than envy and jealousy. But today at noon, the exciting scene they'd been looking forward to for a long time had happened. Someone had actually come to the Immortal Abode to cause trouble because of a problem with a table. This made the other restaurants incredibly excited. Even if they couldn't obtain any benefits from seeing the immortal abode in trouble, it was still enough to comfort them. Chapter 123. Ever since the immortal abode opened for business, even the emperor and empress had personally attended. Numerous civil and military officials had also come to congratulate them. In addition, the embroidered uniform guard could appear at any time, reducing the chances of someone causing trouble to a minimum. Even if there were customers who were dissatisfied with not being able to sit at a table, they could only endure due to the reputation of the immortal abode. As time passed, the guests who came here got used to it. There were even some who used this as an excuse to take advantage of the situation. For example, when someone offended an enemy, owed money, or was on the wrong side of the road, the immortal abode would become their place of refuge. Often, as long as they stood in line, no matter how deep their hatred was, they wouldn't dare to make a move here. In this kind of environment, the employees of the immortal abode naturally developed a sense of security. For example, the two supervisors, Mu Lily and Chuena, used to be the procuress of the 100 Flowers Hall and 9 Arts Workshop. They used to compete in secret. Now that they were both supervisors of the immortal abode, they began to compare themselves in secret. Fortunately, Dong Shui was there to suppress them, so they didn't dare to go too far. On the contrary, they fought over each other, all for the sake of leaving a better impression in Dong Shui's heart. Although the supervisors of the immortal abode had a lot of work to do, and they had to interact with a lot of customers every day, the good thing was that everyone gave them enough face. At the very least, they were in a cheerful mood. As a result, the two supervisors didn't have to act as if they were inferior to others. On the contrary, everyone's status was equal here. There were even some who would say good things in front of them and secretly give them money in order to get a position faster. The immortal abode had long since established a rule that no employee was allowed to accept tips. If they were caught doing so, they would be fired immediately with no room for negotiation. Because of this, only 2 people had been caught since the opening of the immortal abode. Their faces were full of regret as they begged for mercy. Even if they knelt on the ground, it did not change their ending at all. This was also a great deterrent to the other staff members here. Even the 2 foremen did not dare to take a single silver coin for themselves. In fact, Yang Qindong had always treated everyone who worked for him well. For many people, being provided with food, clothing, and money was already a good thing that fell from the sky. There were also some people who were selfish and greedy beyond measure. It was no wonder that they were ruthlessly dealt with. Since they couldn't take tips, nice words poured in like a tide. As the foreman, Mu Lily and Chuena felt as if they were bathing in the sun all day long. They were in a good mood. Mu Lily was on duty today. As the foreman, she did her best to arrange everything. Until a waitress ran in front of her and said that there was a customer in the line outside who had an extremely bad attitude. He was so bad that the 2 waitresses in charge of the line were scolded to the point of crying. "There's such a thing? Bring me over to take a look." Mu Lily was astonished to hear that there were people causing trouble outside the immortal abode. In her eyes, what kind of place was this? Even the emperor and empress approved of it, and the officials of the imperial court would visit from time to time. There was actually someone who dared to say such filthy things here? Did they really eat a bear's heart or a leopard's gall? Mu Lily was a bit confused and even a bit curious. She wanted to see just who had the guts to cause trouble outside the immortal abode. She walked over to the long line outside the entrance with the female attendant. As soon as she arrived, she saw a waitress walk up to her with a tear-stained face. "Sister Lily, it's that person. His words are so unpleasant to hear. We called a male waiter over to mediate, but he even knocked him to the ground." "What? He dares to hit people?" Mu Lily's expression was full of shock when she heard this. In her eyes, anyone who dared to cause trouble here already didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. What kind of confidence did he have to actually dare to injure people? Or was he really just a brute without any schemes? Wasn't he afraid of being captured by the embroidered uniform guard and imprisoned? With all kinds of confusion and doubt in her mind, she followed the 2 waitresses to the front of the long line, where she saw the brawny man, Tuj, spittle flying all over the place. Tuj had come here to cause trouble. After receiving General Wang's orders, he'd made his preparations and arrived at the immortal abode at noon the next day. His original plan had been to look for trouble after entering the immortal abode. He hadn't expected that he'd be forced to wait in line because he hadn't made an appointment in advance and didn't have a membership card on him. He was the captain of a dignified general's bodyguard. Even in the Walla, he was an existence that could do as he pleased. Very few people dared to not give him face. How could he not be angry when he was given the cold shoulder here? Add to that the fact that he'd come here to cause trouble in the first place, he immediately flew into a rage. He began to spout nonsense in the queue, cursing the immortal abode and saying that they were bullying their customers. He even encouraged others to stop spending money here. Those who could afford to spend money in the immortal abode were either wealthy or respectable. What they wanted was face. Naturally, they wouldn't be swayed by Tuj's words. They only looked at him as if they were watching a show. Everyone had noticed that there were embroidered uniform guard members nearby. However, they didn't immediately stop this man in foreign clothing. It seemed like they were waiting for some kind of order. The embroidered uniform guard really did want to arrest him, but it was Tuj's attire that allowed them to recognize him as someone from the Walla. It was very likely that he was part of the diplomatic mission. When it came to diplomatic matters, the embroidered uniform guard didn't dare to act recklessly. They were truly the epitome of what it meant to be an expert in civil wars, but an amateur in foreign wars. By the time Mu Lily arrived, this was the scene that greeted her. Tuagura was stomping her feet and cursing something, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. One of the immortal abode's attendants had been beaten up, and blood was flowing from his nose. He glared angrily at Tuagura with the help of a waitress. "What are you doing? Do you know where you are? If you don't explain yourself today, I'll report you to the authorities and have you arrested." Mu Lily looked at the injured waiter from afar. Her eyes flashed with extreme anger. Ever since she'd been promoted to a member of the House of Good Children, she'd been able to speak with many people as equals. She no longer feared the authorities. On the contrary, when she encountered a problem, she would report it to the authorities. Suddenly, an extremely beautiful woman had appeared to criticize him. Even though she wasn't young anymore, she was still in her mid-20s. In Tuj's eyes, she was still extremely attractive. He only felt that the woman in front of him was 100 times prettier than the prostitute he'd found in the red light district last night. His male hormones had officially come online. "Yo, such a beautiful woman wants to work here to earn money? Why don't you follow this captain? I guarantee that you'll live a good life in the future. What do you think?" Tuj's eyes shone brightly. He was like a wolf who'd spotted a sheep. He approached her step by step. She'd interacted with all kinds of men over the years, so she was naturally no stranger to this kind of gaze. Mu Lily sensed a trace of threat, and her aura involuntarily dropped. She took a few steps back, pretending to be unyielding as she said, "What are you trying to do? Let me tell you, I'm a commoner from the Ming dynasty. I'm from a good family. You'd best have some self-respect." "Haha, a good family is good. A good family is clean. I like it." Tuj's brain was currently overtaken by lust. How could he care about such rules? All he wanted to do was to hug Mu Lily in his arms and dote on her. "What are you doing?" Someone in the crowd noticed that something wasn't right. A young man dressed like a scholar took advantage of his tall stature to block Tuj's path. He wanted to stop Tuj's unbearable behavior and reason with him. Tuj felt like he was only a few steps away from touching Mu Lily. However, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. In a fit of anger, he drew his sword without any explanation and slashed it forward. Holy shit! The scholar's eyesight wasn't bad. When he saw the blade coming, he hurriedly dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. However, a corner of his robe had been cut off by the blade. It fluttered in the air as if to tell the crowd that Tuj's anger and killing intent had been truly unleashed. From drawing his sword to slashing it out, the crowd was scared witless. After seeing this person from the Walla's diplomatic mission get serious, no one dared to meddle in this matter. Instead, they all scattered, putting some distance between themselves and the immortal abode's main entrance. In this way, Mu Lily and the two attendants who followed her were completely exposed. Tuj's actions just now didn't seem to be inappropriate in the slightest. In the Walla, one's fists were the absolute law. Apart from the women of the leaders and generals, any other woman could be forcefully snatched away with their fists. Oftentimes, when something like this happened, people would call it a man's action. Not only would he not be punished, he would even be praised. Being captivated by Mu Lily, Tuj's current location was now the Walla's territory. The only thought in his mind was to steal this woman away. He didn't care about anything else at all. Someone come, help. Seeing that there was no distance between her and Tuagur, Mu Lily lost her head out of fear and didn't forget to shout loudly. Her gaze also turned towards the embroidered uniform guards wearing flying fish robes not far away. Unfortunately, the embroidered uniform guard acted as if they didn't see what was happening. They'd already arranged for someone to report the incident to their superiors. They wouldn't act rashly until they received orders. Even if Tuj's actions were to kill someone on the street as a member of the diplomatic mission, he didn't necessarily have to follow the great Ming dynasty's laws. Chapter 124. The brocade robe's indifference caused Mu Lily's expression to change again and again. Her originally rosy cheeks were now drained of color, and her complexion paled considerably. An ominous thought appeared in her mind. It seemed that she was definitely going to suffer a loss today. If she were to be taken away by this outsider on the streets, the consequences would be self-evident. If that were to happen, she might as well die. Mu Lily was someone who had seen the world. When she was young, she had once been a courtesan. Who knew how many men had set their sights on her, but not a single one had succeeded. It was clear that she still had some tricks up her sleeve, and even her personality was firm and unyielding. And now, seeing that she couldn't even rely on the soldiers, she prepared to bite off her tongue and commit suicide in a fit of anger. Even if she were to die here, she couldn't let anyone take her away and ruin her innocence. Mu Lily's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. She wanted to take her own life, but at this moment Tuagur's thick and solid right hand was already in front of her. Seeing that it was about to touch her snow-white skin, Mu Lily closed her eyes, waiting for the final moment to take her own life. However, what happened next didn't happen. Instead, she heard the muffled sound of a fist, followed by a cry of pain. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Jianghu pulling back his fist and Tuogi, falling to the ground. This move also caused Dao Xiao and his team members, who had been hiding in the shadows, to stop what they were doing. They had been arranged here precisely because Yang Qindong had sensed that something was about to happen. In order to complete his mission, Dao Xiao was prepared to open fire. However, he also knew that if he opened fire, things would become complicated. Just as he was hesitating and making up his mind to open fire, Yang Si was one step ahead of him. Yang Si was a trusted person. He was one of the Dong Shui's servants, and was in charge of the security of this place. Normally he would enter the immortal abode and sky beyond heaven more often than the other servants, but his behavior was always extremely ordinary. Even when he was interacting with others, he was extremely polite. Over time, after everyone saw that he did not have the slightest arrogance, they started to get along with him. Occasionally they would even make lewd jokes, which often made this young man who had just turned 20 blush. He was just an ordinary servant. If he wasn't Dong Shui's subordinate, he wouldn't have received any attention. However, such an ordinary person was able to knock Tugger down to the ground with a single punch. This extremely contrasting scene caused Mu Lily's beautiful eyes to widen in shock. At the same time, her face was filled with disbelief. Tugger was knocked down to the ground with a single punch. Furthermore, he was beaten in front of a beauty. This made him feel that he had lost all his face. He snarled and climbed up again. Holding the scimitar in his right hand, he glared at Yang Si. "Brat, you dare to meddle in your grandpa's business? Go to hell." In the next instant, the scimitar flashed with white light as it cut through the air and arrived at Yang Si's chest. This strike was both fast and fierce. Many people with poor eyesight only saw the flash of white light. Because of their nervousness, many people clenched their fists tightly, displaying the nervousness and excitement in their hearts. There were even a few people who reached out with their right hand to press against their hearts, as if their hearts would jump out of their bodies if they didn't do so. Compared to these people, Mu Lily's reaction was even more extreme. She directly let out a cry of alarm. She was truly worried that Yang Si would die because of this. If that happened, even if she bit off her tongue and committed suicide, she still wouldn't be able to make up for her mistake. The scimitar slashed through the air in front of him, followed by a cry of alarm behind him. However, none of this prevented Yang Si from making an accurate judgment. Under his inhuman training, he had long since mastered the ability to maintain a steady state of mind. When the scimitar slashed over, he merely leaned his body slightly to the side and narrowly dodged the sharp edge of the scimitar. Following that, he rushed forward like an arrow. His right hand changed from a fist to a palm as he moved forward, grabbing Tugger's right hand that was holding the scimitar. Following that, before anyone could react, he clenched his fist, twisted his wrist, lifted his arm, and spun his hand around to raise Tugger's right arm high up in the air. Then he exerted some force. Accompanied by a crisp kacha sound, Tugger's right arm was instantly dislocated, causing Tugger to cry out in pain once again. This series of actions was executed extremely beautifully. Regardless of whether it was the timing of the attack or the intensity of the attack, they were all extremely suitable. It gave people the feeling that the outcome of the battle was decided with just a single exchange of blows. Tugger, who looked taller and fiercer, cried out in pain as he hugged his arm. He was like a fat pig that had been slashed but didn't die. After doing all this, Jianghu confidently took 2 steps back and stood back at his original position. It was as if he hadn't made a move at all. Only when he saw Tugger crying out in pain and losing his ability to fight, did Jianghu slowly turn around and come to Mu Lily's side. He extended his right arm to support the trembling Mu Lily and gave her a smile. This smile was like the sun in the cold winter, illuminating Mu Lily's heart. She swore that she had seen many smiles in her life, but none of them were as sincere as the one in front of her eyes. It didn't give her the feeling that her heart was shaken. This smile caused Mu Lily's amorous heart to ripple. Her face turned crimson and her eyes flashed with a blurred color like that of a drunk person. As if he had also felt the changes in Mu Lily's body, Jianghu's face turned red. While feeling his heartbeat suddenly accelerate, he hurriedly turned his head to the side and looked at the 2 female attendants who were also in a daze. He said, "Why aren't you sending Big Sister Mu back to her room to rest?" "Oh yes." After seeing Jianghu's performance just now, the 2 attendants' attitudes towards him underwent a qualitative change. When they heard his words, they didn't dare hesitate in the slightest. They agreed and pulled Mu Lily, whose body was burning hot, away from this place. Just as Mu Lily and the others entered the immortal abode, a group of embroidered uniform guards arrived not too far away. They had received orders to stop Tugger from causing trouble here. However, when they saw that the troublemaker had already been taught a lesson, they casually berated him a few times before walking up to Tugger and leaving. As he watched the embroidered uniform guards leave, Jianghu's intuition told him that this matter wouldn't end just like that. After all, he had dealt with Tugger on the streets. With the embroidered uniform guard's personality, he probably wouldn't let this matter rest so easily. It seemed like he could only immediately report this matter to the young master and let the Dong Shui make a decision. Tugger's arm was reattached by an experienced member of the embroidered uniform guard. Only then did the pain lessen significantly. Now that his body was no longer in so much pain, he returned to his previous arrogant self. He bluntly asked why the embroidered uniform guard hadn't taken down the person who had injured him. Just as Tugger was criticizing the embroidered uniform guard for their unfairness, the embroidered uniform guard appeared. Beside him was a eunuch dressed in eunuch robes. Moreover, from the way the others treated him, it was clear that this person's status wasn't low. His name was Chen Sengbao, and he was the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. He could be considered a well-known figure among the eunuchs. Of the 24 eunuchs of the Ming dynasty, the Ceremony Directorate and the Imperial Horse Directorate were the most important. The Ceremony Directorate was the first of the 12 directorates, and it was often in conflict with the Prime Minister. Although the Imperial Horse Directorate was the last to be established, it was in charge of matters related to the Ministry of War, such as the Imperial Horse Directorate. Even Wang Zhen wasn't able to hide the truth from the eunuchs. There were many people below him who didn't completely listen to his orders. For example, the eunuchs Jin Ying and Gao Rang of the Ceremony Directorate often didn't listen to his orders. There was also this Chen Xingbao. Speaking of Chen Xingbao, he was also deeply trusted by Zhu Qixin. He had once given an imperial edict to Wang Zhen's nephew Wang Lin, to the embroidered uniform guard commander Chen Xingbao, and to the eunuchs Chen Xingbao's nephew Chen Liang, Gao Rang's nephew, Gao Yu Chao Jishang's brother Chao Zheng and Kai Zhong's nephew Kai Go. From this, it could be seen that Chen Xingbao was greatly favored by the emperor. After being favored by the emperor, he became the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. His position was second only to the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Chen Guan. Because this matter involved an envoy, and because weapons were used, Chen Xingbao hurried over to deal with it. He just happened to meet the embroidered uniform guard at the door. Knowing that the embroidered uniform guard was a special envoy from the Walla, Chen Xingbao very courteously followed him to see Tugger. They just happened to hear him shouting, "Eunuch Chen, you've already heard the matter. My Walla envoy was beaten up by a commoner of the Ming dynasty. Shouldn't you give us an explanation?" The embroidered uniform guard commander's face was filled with anger. This was the same as slapping his face. If he couldn't get an explanation, how could he still have the face to lead the envoy? This Chen Xingbao originally wanted to say that he received news that Tugger attacked first, and because of this, he almost injured a commoner of the Ming dynasty. However, when he thought about how no lives were lost and the one who was injured was Tugger, he felt that he had already earned some face. Since that was the case, it wasn't a big deal to hand over the person who beat him up and end this fight. After all, the Ming dynasty and the Walla still valued peace. Tang Qianhu, who did it? Qian Xingbao saw the embroidered uniform guard's Tang Tong and waved his hand to call him over. Tang Tong was in charge of monitoring the envoy. Previously, when the embroidered uniform guard commander went to Yangjia village, he was the one who showed up. This time, when Tugger was beaten up, he was still the one who came forward to investigate the matter. Qian Xingbao's status was higher than Tang Tong's. Since the other party asked, Tang Tong could not answer. After thinking for a moment, he replied, "I heard that it was done by one of Yang Shima's servants." Yang Shima? Yang Qindong? That Dong Shuai. Qian Xingbao chuckled and an imperceptible coldness flashed through his eyes. Yang Qindong's name could be said to be well known in the capital, and he was even in the limelight. Not only was he very talented, he was also very rich. He had also received Zhu Qizhen's recognition, and had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, so everything he did seemed to go smoothly. Chapter 125. But at the same time, because he was too close to Wang Zhen, he attracted the displeasure of some other eunuchs. Qian Xingbao was one of them. Originally, because the emperor valued him, especially Princess Changda's birthday, it was completely arranged by Yang Qindong. It was the first time in the history of the Ming dynasty that a foreign minister was arranged for the princess' birthday. Some people who had ideas didn't dare to act rashly. In addition, he had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, so Qian Xingbao couldn't find a suitable reason to find trouble with Yang Qindong. Now this person's servant was actually involved in this matter. As a result, it was perfectly justifiable to arrest this servant. At that time, if this Yang Qindong was sensible, he would take out a large sum of money and give it to Qian Xingbao. If not, Qian Xingbao would destroy his prestige. No matter what, Walla's envoy was injured this time. We have to give him an explanation. Should Qianhu Tang bring people to call the servant? Of course, we're just investigating the truth of the matter. We're not saying that he's guilty. Qian Xingbao had a sinister smile on his face, as if everything was for the public good. Asking Tang Tong to arrest Yang Qindong's servant was to destroy the relationship between Dong Shuai and Wang Zhen. Who didn't know that Tang Tong was eunuch Wang Zhen's subordinate? Qian Xingbao was wholeheartedly for the public, and he came out in front of Walla's envoy. He didn't have to worry that Tang Tong wouldn't do it. Otherwise, it would be openly disobeying the orders of his superior. Even if a lawsuit was brought to the emperor, Wang Zhen wouldn't be able to plead for his servant. Tang Tong wasn't stupid at all. On the contrary, he was very shrewd. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to become a Qianhu. How could he not see Qian Xingbao's intention? However, the situation was like this. He had no other choice but to do it. He thought that if he explained properly when he went to catch the servant, he would not destroy the relationship between eunuch Wang and Dong Shuai. After all, they were both beneficial if they cooperated and harmful if they separated. Presumably, Dong Shuai should be very clear about this point. He would definitely not destroy the harmony between everyone because of a servant. Alright, I'll go capture them right away. After receiving the order, Tang Tong led her subordinates towards the immortal abode. The immortal abode wasn't affected by what was happening outside. What happened outside the gate was just one of the topics that everyone talked about. Compared to most people's indifference, Mu Lily was extremely nervous. After a while, her heart slowly calmed down. Then she began to worry about Yang Si. Wounding Tile's messenger in the middle of the street was a serious crime. She didn't know how a mere servant like him could be so skilled. This time he had caused such a big mess. He wondered if anything would happen to him. Although Dong Shuai was very capable, this was only a servant's accident. How much effort would he put in? If Yang Si was punished because of her, or even arrested by the brocade guard, what would she do? Just when Mu Lily was blaming herself, Madame Snow came to her room to rest. When she smiled, 2 shallow dimples appeared on her cheeks. With Dong Shuai's nourishment, she looked even more indescribably beautiful. "Sister Mu, why did you call me here in such a hurry? What's the matter?" Madame Shui was arranging the performances in the front hall. Suddenly, a waiter told her that Mu Lily was looking for her. She was very anxious. She put off all her work and came here because of the sisterly love between sisters. Seeing Xiao Yuxue, Mu Lily acted as if she had seen her savior. She stepped forward and grabbed Xiao Yushue's wrist. Yuxue, you must help me this time. What's going on? Madame Xue knew that Mu Lily was a strong-willed person. Although she had panicked a lot in the past, she had never been like this. She seemed to be out of her wits. Madame Xue was also shocked by her change. Yuxue, you know that there was a fight outside the gate just now, right? Here's the thing. After Mu Lily told her the details, Xiao Yushue's face changed. She became more nervous and worried. So this time, in order to save you, Yang Si injured the messenger of Walla, which got him into big trouble. Unless Dong Shuai is willing to help, I'm afraid that he is just a servant. He is destined to make sacrifices and even pay a price for this. Mu Lily was so anxious that she burst into tears. Wait, Sister Mu. Don't worry. Let me think about it. Xiao Yuxue had become the top courtesan of 100 Flowers Hall not only because of her sweet voice, but also because of her wisdom. Otherwise, she would have been able to become Dong Shuai's woman, while Madame Xiang had not been able to become Dong Shuai's woman. Xiao Yuxue forced herself to calm down. She thought about the seriousness of the matter first. If Yang Si was just a servant of Dong Shuai, it was indeed troublesome for him to do such a thing. If it were other masters, they would probably push him out and make him a sacrifice in order to calm down the situation. But Dong Shuai was not an ordinary person. He would not treat his servant like this. Xiao Yuxue comforted herself. Mu Lily seemed to be a little impatient. Yuxue, this time no matter what, you have to help me, begged Dong Shuai. As long as Yang Si is fine, I'm willing to do anything to atone for his crime. Mu Lily's eagerness made Xiao Yuxue feel that something was wrong. After thinking for a while, she widened her eyes and asked, Sister Mu, Yang Si just saved you once. You don't have to be so excited. But why do you seem to be ready to risk everything? Is it because... Yes, I just fell in love with him. The moment he saved me, his smile completely opened my heart. To tell you the truth, I fell in love with him at that time. Mu Lily was really daring. Faced with Madame Xue's test, she admitted it directly. This was a little beyond Xiao Yushue's expectation. She had thought that Mu Lily just wanted to repay her kindness, but now it seemed that it was not so simple. It was very likely that if something happened to Yang Si, then this elder sister would not live alone. She knew her sister well. She knew that she was capable of doing such a thing. Thinking that Yang Si's life was closely related to Mu Lily's, Xiao Yuxue did not dare to neglect her. Okay, I'll go back to the Yang village and plead with Dong Shuai. Thank you, thank you. Mu Lily's face was full of gratitude. She knew that Madame Xue was willing to plead with Dong Shuai because of her. This was also why she was willing to confess her feelings for Yang Si without any reservations. Madame Xue left as soon as she said she would. She got into her carriage and left the immortal abode. About 15 minutes after she left, Tang Tong arrived, accompanied by 50 members of the embroidered uniform guard. Wang Zhen held important shares in the immortal abode, so Tang Tong didn't dare act recklessly. He didn't even put on his flying suit. Instead, he changed into casual clothes and went to find Mu Lily, the head of the immortal abode. Mu Lily was shocked by Tang Tong's sudden arrival. She had a premonition that something was going to happen, but in order to give Madame Xue enough time to plead, she pretended not to know anything. When she heard that Tang Tong was looking for Yang Si, she put on a serious face and said that she had seen him just now, and that she would send someone to look for him. Tang Tong didn't suspect anything and agreed with a smile. However, they waited for an hour until he was getting impatient. Mu Lily also knew that she couldn't hide it any longer. Only then did she say that Yang Si had most likely returned to the Yang clan manor. Let's go to the Yang clan manor. Tang Tong's face was full of displeasure. They'd been here for too long. Who knew if they'd be able to find Yang Si? He didn't want to cause trouble if he missed his job. Mu Lily's heart clenched as she watched Tang Tong and the others leave. She'd originally wanted to go back and take a look, but she was on duty today. If she left, it would be a dereliction of duty. It would only anger Dong Shuai and the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Since she couldn't go back with them, all she could do was pray that nothing happened to Yang Si. Xiao Yushue's pleas would be effective. The situation in the Yang clan manor was completely different from what Mu Lily had imagined. Yang Qindong had no intention of giving up on Yang Si. His personality didn't allow him to do so. Yang Si had rushed back as soon as he'd finished his preparations. As soon as he entered the manor, he saw Yang Qindong and gave him a detailed account of what had happened. Then he half knelt on the ground. His actions today were a little rash, but seeing that the embroidered uniform guards were only watching the show without making a move, he could not just stand by and watch Mu Lily be taken away. If that was the case, he was afraid that it would make the young master unhappy. Yang Chendong was writing something in his study. It was a new song and a new book. The area covered by Yang Bao was no longer limited to the capital. He had already reached Tianjinwei, and the next step was to prepare to enter the auxiliary capital, Nanjing. Although this might take some time, the necessary preparations had to be made. As he wrote, he listened to Yang Xi's report. From the beginning to the end, there was not the slightest change. Even when he heard that Tuogir's arm had been dislocated, he still continued to write with vigor. Qiao Yin, who was grinding ink at the side, trembled. She was clearly afraid when she heard this. It's fine. Yang Chendong had no choice but to put down his brush. He gently placed his hand on the back of Qiao Yin's hand and gave her a comforting smile. Then he slowly turned his gaze to Yang Xi, who was kneeling on the ground. You did the right thing. Get up. Thank you, young master. The words "did the right thing" made Yang Xi feel as if he had been pardoned. He stood up, and Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who were standing to the side, hurriedly reached out to help him up. In the past few days they had gotten along very well, as if they were blood brothers. Of course, they didn't want to see their brother make any mistakes. Chapter 126. When he saw Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei's nervous expressions, Yang Chendong chuckled. With our current strength we can still cause trouble, but we shouldn't be afraid of it. If anyone provokes us when it comes to matters of principle, we absolutely cannot back down. If we can't back down, we'll F***ck them up. The vulgar F***ck them up caused Tiger's Mane and the others to tremble, their eyes shining. This was the temperament and style of a true hero. This matter was originally caused by the Walla emissaries being overbearing. They wanted to see me but couldn't, so they had no choice but to target the immortal abode. Yang Chendong's mind was very clear, and he quickly thought through the entire situation. Since this matter has come, there's no way to avoid it. If that's the case, then we'll just have to face it as we should. Yang Chendong spoke with a face full of confidence. This confidence came from his large warehouse. With it, he didn't believe that there was anyone in this world who could harm him. If it weren't for the sake of the great Ming's people, and the fact that he didn't want them to experience the flames of war, he would have already used Crimson City as the center and slaughtered his way into the great Ming's interior. If he didn't want the common people to suffer, then he had to play a big game of chess. In the process of laying out his plans, he had to endure patiently. However, enduring patiently didn't mean that he had no principles to back down. For example, Yang Xi's actions were within his rights. If he couldn't even protect his people this time, then his titles as young master and Dong Shui would lose all meaning. No matter how many treasures there were in the warehouse, they would only be decorations. Yang Xi had to be protected. As for how many troublesome matters would arise in the process, he would just have to deal with them as they came. He had already made up his mind. When he was about to announce it, Madame Snow stumbled into the study. Her face was covered in sweat, and her expression was extremely nervous. When she entered the study and saw that Yang Xi was still standing there, she breathed a sigh of relief. Sister Shui, what happened to you? Qiao Yin was shocked to see Madame Snow in such a state. She hurriedly took out a fragrant handkerchief and walked over. Yang Chendong's eyes also fell on Madame Snow. There was curiosity and doubt in his eyes. At the same time, there was a faint murderous intent flowing in his eyes. Yang Chendong thought that something big must have happened to make Madame Snow so nervous. Could it be that someone had attacked the immortal abode? Someone was challenging his bottom line, forcing him to erupt with an appropriate amount of strength. I'm fine. Noticing the confusion in their eyes, Madame Shui thought that she might have acted too hastily and caused misunderstandings. She hurriedly explained, I'm here for Yang Xi. Young master, can I beg you not to hurt Yang Xi? He did it to save Sister Mu. Big Sister Mu said that as long as young master spares Yang Xi, she'll do anything you ask of her. She's willing to be a slave for the rest of her life, working for the immortal abode. Wait a moment. Yang Chendong interrupted Madame Snow. Why is Mu Lily so worried about Yang Xi? You came here in such a hurry. You must have been entrusted with this by Big Sister Mu, right? His question hit the nail on the head. Madame Snow's face flushed red. She knew that nothing could be hidden from Dong Shui. She nodded and said, "Yes, Big Sister Mu went to find Madame Snow. She said that Yang Si did everything to save her. She couldn't be ungrateful, so she asked me to intercede on his behalf." "I'm afraid that's not all." Yang Chendong chuckled. He'd heard something different in Madame Snow's words. Yang Si was just a servant. In any other noble family, his existence was completely dispensable. Even if he'd made some kind of contribution, he wouldn't have earned such gratitude from his master. But judging from Mu Lily's expression, she was obviously very anxious. Otherwise, Madame Snow wouldn't have come back in such a hurry. There must be something else. Since Yang Chendong had pointed it out, Madame Snow knew that there were some things that she couldn't hide. Otherwise, if Dong Shuai found out that she had something on her mind, it would be a big deal. After deciding to say it, she turned her head, looked at Yang Si and said, "Elder Sister Mu admires you, you can be considered lucky." What? Yang Si hadn't figured out what had happened. But when Madame Snow suddenly pointed at him, he was immediately stunned. At first he didn't know what to do. Then his face turned red. Obviously he was a little overwhelmed and even a little emotional. "Ah." Yang Chendong, on the other hand, could not help laughing out loud when he finally heard Mu Lily's attitude from Madame Snow. Good luck. Yang Si, you're in luck." "Ah. Young master." Yang Si was very embarrassed by Yang Chendong's laughter. He could only lower his head and express his feelings silently. "Well, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Tell me, do you like Mu Lily? Of course she's a few years older than you. If you don't like her, it's fine. Just make her give up on this idea." Although Yang Chendong was very happy that these trusted subordinates of his settled down early, he was also relieved. However, he wouldn't force her to do anything. Love required mutual love, and the two of them had to spend their days together. It wasn't something that could be done by force. "Well?" Yang Si reached out and scratched his head. He was a little embarrassed to face some questions. "Don't beat around the bush. The young master asked you. Just tell him the truth. What are you afraid of?" Tiger's Mane urged anxiously when he saw Yang Si's ambiguous attitude. His right hand was naturally raised. From the looks of it, if Yang Si couldn't give an answer, this slap would fall at any time. Seeing that everyone was looking at him and waiting for an answer, Yang Si knew that it was not the time to be pretentious. He immediately raised his head and looked at Yang Chendong. He knelt on the ground again. "Young master, I also like Steward Mu. If she's willing, please accept her, young master." When Yang Si finally expressed his attitude, Tiger's Mane's big hand finally fell and hit him on the back of the neck. Tiger's Mane then laughed and said, "You're the one who dares to admit what you did." "Ah." Hearing Tiger's Mane's words, several people in the study laughed. Yang Chendong's face was also filled with joy. "Very good. Since both of you have feelings for each other, let's settle this matter first. Once this matter is over, we'll work for them. But before that, Yang Si, you need to hide for a while. Tell everyone that he has returned to his hometown in Jianghu Prefecture. Do you understand?" This was Yang Chendong's preparation to protect Yang Si. After hearing this, everyone immediately agreed in unison. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the study. Yang Wu walked into the study and half knelt. "Young Master Chinhu Tang Tong of the Embroidered Uniform Guard is here. He said he has something to ask you." He came so quickly. Yang Chendong's face immediately became serious. "Take him to the side hall and wait." "Young master, I'll go over now." "Yes." Yang Wu answered and left. Yang Chendong looked at Tiger's Mane and said, "Take Yang Si to the backyard and find a place to hide. Tiger's Mane, follow young master to the side hall and meet Tang Tong." After saying this, Yang Chendong stood up. Madame Snow looked at him anxiously and seemed to want to say something, but he spoke first. "Don't think too much. Yang Si will be fine." Yang Chendong went straight to the side hall. Madame Snow was still a little uneasy. Xiao Yin, who stayed behind, held her hand and comforted her. "Sister Snow, don't worry. With young master here, Yang Si will never be handed over." These words weren't words of comfort, but Xiao Yin was well aware of the close relationship between the young master and the retainers. It's just that some things can't be explained to others. You can only rely on yourself to observe and see with your heart to understand a thing or two. Tang Tong had just been led into the side hall by Yang Wu when Yang Chendong and Tiger's Mane appeared in the side hall. Seeing Yang Chendong in green, Tang Tong did not dare to be arrogant. She quickly sat up and saluted with her hands folded. "Greetings, Yang Chendong." "Haha, Chiliarch Tang, you're welcome." Yang Chendong pointed to the chair with a smile on his face. "Thank you, Yang Chendong." Tang Tong said politely and then sat down again. A maid brought tea and put it in front of Tang Tong and Yang Qindong. Then she left. As a guest, Tang Tong gently picked up the teacup and took a sip. Then she nodded with a look of enjoyment. Dong Shuai's tea is really good. Chiliarch Tang, you're welcome. If you like it, you can take some back when you leave. Yang Qindong still had a smile on his face. He spoke unhurriedly and did not seem to have any intention of asking why Tang Tong was here. In Tang Tong's eyes, Yang Qindong's calmness made him unhappy. He had brought dozens of brocade guards with him. If it were other ministers, they would have panicked and lost their composure. There were usually only two possibilities for Yang Qindong to show such indifference. First, he was pretending to be stupid. Second, he was really stupid. The great Dong Shuai could not have a problem with his brain. Then, it could only be the first answer. It seemed that it would be very difficult to find Yang Si who had hit people. However, he had to do his job. Even if this trip was annoying, he could only get straight to the point. Yang Qindong, the situation is like this. This Chiliarch is here for a servant of yours named Yang Si. He injured people outside the immortal abode earlier. They've already reported it to the authorities and are going to confront him. However, I don't know if it would be convenient for you to hand him over? Tang Tong spoke in a probing tone. If one looked closely, they would even see a trace of a smile on her face. It was as if she wanted to tell Yang Qindong that she was not here for him. She was here because the implications of this matter were too great. Given her position, she had no choice. Chapter 127. Yang Qindong listened attentively without the slightest hint of annoyance. It was as if he had just learned of this matter. When Tang Tong finished speaking and closed his mouth, he feigned surprise and said, "Something like this actually happened. How audacious." Tang Tong didn't know whether he was referring to Yang Si who had beaten someone up, or to Tang Gu, who had wanted to commit murder outside the immortal abode. As soon as he said this, Tang Tong's expression became somewhat unsightly. However, what made him even more embarrassed was that Yang Qindong seemed to have only expressed his attitude. After saying this, he didn't say anything else. Unable to bear it any longer, Lord Tang raised his head to look, only to see Yang Qindong leisurely sipping on his tea. This attitude really infuriated Tang Tong quite a bit. "What's this? Your servant was injured by someone else, and as the master, you're just going to let it go with a single comment of audacity?" Tang Tong's expression darkened. "Yang Shima, you see, the matter has already happened. Shouldn't we arrest him?" "Of course. A life for a life and a debt must be repaid. Although he didn't kill anyone, beating someone up is still wrong. If Lord Tang wants to arrest him, then go ahead. There's no need to give this official face." Seeing that Tang Tong was starting to get impatient, Yang Qindong spoke with a righteous expression. He didn't seem like he was going to show any favoritism. "Good. It's rare for Lord Tang to be so righteous. Since that's the case, can't you hand him over?" Tang Tong knew that what he was doing would make Yang Qindong unhappy. However, he had to do his job, so he had to do it properly. Besides, he was only arresting a servant, not making things difficult for Yang Qindong. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Hand him over? In that instant, it was Yang Qindong's turn to be shocked and confused. Since Yang Si injured someone, Lord Tang should just go ahead and arrest him. Why are you still asking this official for him? It's really puzzling. Yang Qindong shook his head as he spoke. He was just short of saying that Tang Tong's request was too abrupt, too inappropriate. Upon seeing Yang Qindong's reaction, Tang Tong finally understood what the Dong Shuai was thinking. To put it nicely, he was shirking responsibility. To put it bluntly, he was pretending to be stupid and acting shamelessly. If he had already caught Yang Si, why would he need to make this trip to the Yang family manor? Although Yang Qindong had some talent, some ability to make money, and even had a cooperative relationship with his superior, eunuch Wang Zhen, these were not enough for him to greet him over such a small matter. Angry at Yang Qindong's act of pretending to be stupid, Tang Tong's expression became much more severe. "Yang Shima, to tell you the truth, Yang Si escaped and I don't know where he went. This time I came to the Yang family manor to ask you to hand him over." Seeing that Tang Tong had finally revealed his tale, Yang Qindong chuckled and shook his head as if he had heard a funny joke. "Lord Tang, I said that Yang Si beat someone up. It's right for you to arrest him. There's no need to say anything to this official. As for what you said about asking me to hand him over, it's really inconceivable." "What? Could it be that Yang Shima didn't hide him? I've already asked the soldiers guarding the city. They saw Yang Si coming out of the city gate and heading towards the Yang family manor. Tang Tong laid out the situation she knew on the table, as if she already had something on him. He had no choice but to admit it. What a joke. If that's the case, then Lord Tong is certain that I'm harboring criminals. Very well, then please show me the evidence. If this official is guilty, then I'm willing to accept the punishment. Yang Qindong spread out his hands and frowned as he spoke with great displeasure. I don't have direct evidence, but this lord is certain that Yang Si must be in the Yang family manor. If you don't hand him over, then forgive this lord for being unreasonable and searching the manor. Tang Tong's eyes widened, and even the veins on his arms bulged to express his dissatisfaction. Tang Tong's threat rang out in the side hall. When Tiger's Mane heard it, his body unconsciously tensed up. He was certain that as long as the young master gave the order, he would immediately take action to subdue Tang Tong. What bullshit, lord of the embroidered uniform guard. Perhaps he had some martial arts skills, but he was nothing in the eyes of the number one person in the Yang family's military. Tang Tong was still staring at Yang Qindong and didn't notice anything wrong with Tiger's Mane. On the other hand, Yang Qindong sensed a slight change and coughed lightly to remind Tiger's Mane not to act rashly. Then he turned to look at Tang Tong and said, Lord Tang, are you that confident? How can you be so sure that anyone who comes to my Yang village will definitely enter my village? Have you ever thought that if you forcefully searched the manor and couldn't find anyone, this official would report you? When he saw that Yang Qindong wanted to threaten him, Tang Tong raised his head and put on an insufferably arrogant and fearless expression. Yang Qindong saw all of this and laughed instead of getting angry. Oh, right, I forgot that Lord Tang is a member of the embroidered uniform guard. You aren't afraid of being impeached by us officials. However, I don't know if silver is enough. 10,000 taels, 100,000 taels, or even 1,000,000 taels. I believe that as long as this official is able to fork out the silver, there should be many people in the palace who are willing to speak up for this official. When the time comes, one side is a huge sum of money, while the other is a mere lord of the embroidered uniform guard. What do you think those people will choose? Of course, it's hard to say if you are worth that much money. However, this official knows that in order to maintain their dignity, it is worth it to fork out some silver. Not to mention this official has a lot of silver, so much so that I can't spend it all. I don't think I need anyone to remind me of this, right? As soon as he finished speaking, Tang Tong's expression changed again. When Tang Tong first heard that he was going to be impeached, he didn't care. After all, he was a member of the embroidered uniform guard and this time he was in the right. This was also the reason why the embroidered uniform guard and the East faction guards were so arrogant. However, when he continued to listen and heard that Yang Qindong wanted to use silver to pave the way and bribe the people in the palace, it was as if he had hit the weak spot of a snake. Finally, his expression began to change drastically. It wasn't the people in the imperial court, but the people in the palace. This meant that Yang Qindong didn't want to give the silver to the officials, but to the eunuchs in the palace. As a subordinate of the eunuchs, Tang Tong was very clear about the human nature of eunuchs. In the eyes of these people who couldn't be considered complete, loyalty and friendship were all nonsense. Only silver and authority were tangible things that could be seen and touched. The entire embroidered uniform guard only had 14,000 man posts and only 14,000 man officers. Who knew how many people were staring at each of the positions? If he didn't make any mistakes, there would still be people looking for mistakes. If Yang Qindong was really willing to pay a large sum of money, his position as the 1,000-man officer would really be in danger. He even thought that in the face of such a large sum of money, even his immediate superior, eunuch Wang Zhen, might abandon him. In the palace there was no lack of capable people. Under the influence of what they saw and heard every day, the eunuchs had long gotten used to the internal strife. They had long understood what it meant to cheat each other and what it meant to hit someone when they were down. Once something happened to him, he didn't know how many people would secretly plot against him. Would Yang Qindong be willing to pay a large sum of money? Others didn't know, but the things that this person did couldn't be judged by common sense. Perhaps for the so-called dignity that wasn't worth much, he would really do it. If he was really willing to pay 1,000,000 taels of silver, he dared to guarantee that he would have a good time raiding the village. However, it wouldn't be long before countless reasons would appear to make him a prisoner. After a careful analysis, Tang Tong couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. When he looked at Yang Qindong, although the other party's face had already returned to its previous calm state and looked as harmless as before, For some reason in his eyes, Yang Qindong seemed to have become as terrifying as a ferocious tiger that could eat people. Noticing that Tang Tong's expression was constantly changing, Yang Qindong didn't say anything else, nor did he have the intention to rush him. He knew that some things needed to be thought through by himself. Of course, if the other party wasn't afraid of his threat, then there was only one last step left, which was to let the tiger's man and the others strike first. Although the consequences of this would be extremely severe, it was still better than raiding the village. After the Yang family manor passed through his hands, there were already too many secrets. Many of the good things stored were also used up and he didn't have time to put them away. This matter also reminded Yang Qindong that in the future, it was better not to put too many things that could not be seen by others in the manor. He had to be vigilant at all times. He did not want to wait until something big happened. If he reacted, then it might be too late. Yang Qindong didn't say anything, but Tang Tong's heart was in turmoil. In the end, his rationality prevailed over his impulse. If he searched the village, regardless of whether he found Yang Si or not, he was afraid that this enmity would be formed. He could foresee that the outcome that awaited him wouldn't be too good. Since that was the case, he might as well do a favor at little cost. Sigh. After a long sigh, Tang Tong was also an expert at acting. He frowned and said as if he had been wronged, "Yang Si Ma, of course this Qian who doesn't want to make things difficult for you. However, the order was given by the Imperial Horse Supervisor Eunuch Qian Seng. I'm only following orders. If I can't find him, I really don't know how to explain it." That's simple. Yang Qindong's face was full of confidence. He gave Tang Tong a friendly smile and said, "Qian Hu Tang, you can say that Yang Si knew that he had hurt someone and was afraid of being sued, so he has already left the capital. It's very likely that he went to the Yang family manor in Jianghu Prefecture. As long as the checkpoints along the way are strict, it's very likely that he will be intercepted and arrested halfway." Chapter 128. This was the reason Yang Qindong came up with. He didn't say that he couldn't catch Yang Si. This was to give Qian Xingbao hope and allow Tang Tong to report back. As for whether he could catch Yang Si or not, it wouldn't be long before Walla's messenger couldn't even protect himself. When that happened, who would pay attention to Yang Si? Even if someone saw Yang Si, his identity would be changed. He would no longer be a madman but a hero who killed the enemy. Tang Tong was startled when he heard the reason. He then asked suspiciously, "Did Yang Si really escape? Can we really catch him? Does Yang Xinma know the consequences if we catch him?" "I know. Don't worry, Lord Tang. By the way, all of you must be tired from the trip. I've already prepared 5,000 taels of silver outside. When Lord Tang leaves, please distribute it to all of you." Since Tang Tong asked such a question, it meant that he agreed with the reason. He was just worried. Since the matter had been settled, Yang Qindong naturally had to show sufficient friendliness. 5,000 taels of silver was just enough to fill a large wooden chest. Using this to settle this matter was worth it no matter how one looked at it. Whether it was at the seaside of Crimson City, Immortal Abode, or Sky Beyond Heaven, Yang Qindong could be described as earning a fortune every day. Since he didn't lack money, any problem that could be solved with silver taels wouldn't be a problem anymore. With a reason to report back in silver taels, Tang Tong's expression instantly turned for the better. He cupped his fists and smiled, "Yang Xinma is too courteous. Since Yang Si isn't in the manor and has escaped to Jianghu residence, I will report back now. As for Lord Tang's decision, it will be up to the higher-ups." Of course. Yang Qindong chuckled. He knew that Tang Tong wouldn't make things difficult for him on this matter. After this matter, the friendship between the two deepened. Of course, the smile on Tang Tong's face became even brighter. Reporting. Just as Yang Qindong and Tang Tong were laughing and looking at each other, looking like they were getting along very well, Yang Wu suddenly ran in from outside the door. Because he was running too fast, he almost tripped over the door sill. "What's going on? Don't you see that young master is talking with someone?" Seeing Yang Wu lose his composure, Tiger's Mane stepped forward and reprimanded him softly. "What happened?" Yang Qindong noticed Tiger's Mane's loss of composure and was somewhat puzzled. In his impression, these Yang family retainers had long been trained to remain calm even if Mount Tai were to collapse in front of them. He really didn't know what had happened to make them behave like this. "Young master, third young master is here. He has already entered the manor." Yang Wu didn't have time to explain anything to Tiger's Mane. When he saw Yang Qindong's question, he immediately answered. Third princess? Princess Changde? Why is she here? Yang Chendong was slightly taken aback when he heard this. Princesses, especially after reaching adulthood, weren't allowed to leave the palace as they pleased? Then why did she come to his manor without even greeting him? What was going on? Yang Chendong was flabbergasted. Tang Tong, who had been chatting happily with him, also had a similarly confused look on his face. He also didn't understand why the princess would leave the palace, and why she would come to the Yang manor. While the two of them were puzzled, or rather unable to react for a moment, the sound of noisy footsteps came from outside the side hall. Then they heard a eunuch shout in a high-pitched voice, "The princess has arrived." As the voice fell, a group of junior eunuchs entered the hall. Then, under the escort of a dozen palace maids, Princess Changde, dressed in a pink gown, walked in and stood in front of Yang Chendong. Speaking of which, this was the second time the two of them had met. "Greetings, Princess Chen Sui." Tang Tong reacted quickly. Once he saw Princess Changde, he knelt on the ground. Yang Chendong, who was at the side, was only slightly taken aback before he had no choice but to kneel on the ground as well. "Rise." Fortunately, before Yang Chendong's knees touched the ground, Princess Changde had already spoken. "Thank you, Chen Sui." Yang Chendong knew when to stop and hurriedly got up. His movements were even faster than Tang Tong's. Fortunately, the princess's attention wasn't on him. Instead, she stared at Tang Tong and said, "I recognize you. You're Tang Tong, right?" Hearing that the princess actually recognized him, Tang Tong's face was naturally filled with joy. Princess has a good memory. This lowly one is Tang Tong, and now, Tang Tong seemed to want to use this opportunity to show off. He had heard that Princess Changde and the emperor were siblings from the same mother, and had a very good relationship. With his status, fawning on the emperor was a little far-fetched, but fawning on the princess was a shortcut. But before he could finish, Princess Changde had already spoken. "Why did you bring so many people to the Yang family manor? Did Yang Jima commit any crime?" "Ah? This he didn't." Tang Tong didn't know what the princess meant, but from her tone he could tell that she was a little angry, so he wanted to explain himself. However, Princess Changde had no intention of listening to his explanation. Instead, she waved her hand impatiently. "All right, as long as Yang Jima didn't do anything wrong, then don't create such a scene in the future. Don't think that just because royal brother gave you power, you can really do whatever you want. Let me tell you, others might be afraid of you, but this princess isn't. If you anger this princess, we'll see who's the one who loses out in front of royal brother." After Princess Changde's words, Tang Tong felt the world spin. It seemed that the third princess was here to support Yang Chendong. Fortunately, she didn't give the order to search the manor. Otherwise, she really didn't know how to clean up this mess. Others might not be able to comment on the matters of the eunuch group, but as a member of the royal family, Princess Changde could. Not only was she on good terms with the queen of the imperial harem, Empress Qian, she was also the emperor's biological sister. She was greatly appreciated by the emperor. This could be seen from the grand birthday banquet that was held a while ago. Tang Tong broke out in cold sweat, his lips trembling. He knew that if he didn't clarify today's matter, there would be consequences later on. Thus he didn't care so much and lowered his head. "Long live Princess, this lowly one is here on the orders of Supervisor Chen Xingbao to investigate this matter." "What's there to investigate? Don't think that this princess doesn't know. It's just beating up a Walla envoy, but you didn't investigate clearly who provoked them first before arresting people? Also, the one who beat him up was just an ordinary servant of the Yang family. You even bothered the Eastern commander over such a small matter. If that's the case, then if someone from the embroidered uniform guards made a mistake, shouldn't they also ask the Qinhu directly in charge of you for an explanation?" Princess Changde's coquettish voice resounded throughout the entire side hall. Her words left Tang Tong speechless. He originally thought that the third princess just happened to be there at the right time. But with these words, who wouldn't understand that she had clearly come prepared? She was even here specifically to solve the problem for Yang Chendong. At this moment, Tang Tong finally understood that with the third princess backing Yang Chendong, he wasn't someone he could mess with in the future. Yes, long live Princess is right. I will go back and report this to Eunuch Qian." Tang Tong nodded his head as he spoke. From the looks of it, he looked exactly like a pug. Tang Tong left, but he didn't forget to take the chest of silver that Yang Chendong had prepared with him. From this point of view, he had accepted the goodwill. He had already promised that if he didn't take the silver this time, it would mean that he would have to draw a line with the Eastern commander in the future. Princess Shangda came and reprimanded Tang Tong, showing her rude and unreasonable side. As the outside world said, she was incomparably coquettish. However, when everyone in the side hall was reprimanded by her, she indeed looked at Yang Qindong with a smile like a flower. It was as if she was staring at an extremely exquisite ancient artifact. This gaze made sixth young Master Yang feel as if he had become a rare animal in the zoo. It was a very bad feeling. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Yang Qindong was the first to speak, cupping his fists in a grateful manner. Thank you for speaking up for me, Princess. Qindong really has nothing to repay you with. Sai, how can there be nothing to repay you with? You are so capable, you must have a lot of fun things. Just take out 2 of them and let this princess see them. Princess Shangda spoke casually, but in Yang Qindong's ears he was extremely wary. He had never underestimated anyone, even if the girl in front of him was only 14 years old. She had grown up in the imperial family since she was young, so she had matured earlier than others. After getting used to too many dirty things, it was impossible for her to not be mature. Usually, every word of this kind of person had a deep meaning. Everything depended on how the person who heard it interpreted it. If you ignored these words, you might unknowingly suffer a great loss. Not knowing whether this was a test or not, Yang Qindong pondered for a moment before raising his head and saying with a smile, "Princess, you must be joking. Whatever Qindong has, the imperial family has as well. Even the world belongs to the great Ming dynasty. If there is anything here that princess likes, you can take it away." Is that true? Sensing Yang Qindong's cautious and guarded manner, Princess Shangda smiled. Not to mention she had inherited the Zhu family's bloodline. Regardless of her temper, she was beautiful and charming. Under this smile there were many things to admire. Yes. Yang Qindong's gaze tightened. Then he felt that it wasn't very friendly to look directly at the princess, so he looked away and agreed. Ah, very good. Since that's the case, then this princess won't stand on ceremony. Princess Shangda giggled. Then her gaze began to size up the side hall. However, it was only for a moment before it finally landed on Yang Qindong and the jade pendant on his waist. Chapter 129. Yang Qindong was also sizing up Princess Shangda. When he saw her gaze fall on the jade pendant he carried with him, his heart tightened. This was a waist pendant with the words peace engraved on it. It wasn't very valuable, but it was given to him by his father when he was 1 year old. It had an extraordinary meaning. Princess, this was given to me by my father. This, what? Dong Shui just said that everything here belongs to the Zhu family and that we can take it as we wish. Are you going back on your words now? Princess Shangda said sternly. Her face, which was originally pleasant to look at, changed in an instant, giving people a lot of pressure. This pressure obviously couldn't scare Yang Qindong, but it reminded him of her identity. Indeed, they were all from the Zhu family. None of them were easy to get along with. They changed their faces faster than flipping a book. Not wanting to be a busybody, he immediately took off his waist pendant and handed it over with both hands. Since the princess likes it, you can have it. Ah, that's more like it. As if she really liked this waist pendant, Princess Shangda stretched out her jade-like hands to receive it. Then she regained the innocent expression of a girl. Alright, this princess has helped you solve your problem. Asking for a waist pendant from you isn't considered bullying me. Ah, let's go. Princess Shangda left just like that, not staying for long. She probably knew that with her current status, staying too long in the Yang family village would easily attract criticism. Although she wasn't afraid of public opinion, it was better to avoid as much trouble as possible. The princess left, leaving Yang Qindong alone in the side hall, deep in thought. The third princess's sudden appearance and quick departure made him a little uncertain. If he had to pinpoint her intentions, it would be that she had only taken a waist pendant. He didn't believe that a spoiled princess would care so much about an ordinary waist pendant. Even when Xiao Yin and Lady Shui appeared in the side hall, hand in hand, Yang Qindong still couldn't figure out what was going on. On the other hand, the 2 women seemed to be aware of his predicament. Because Xiao Yin had been with Yang Qindong for a long time, she was the most courageous. She bluntly said, "Young master, I'm afraid the princess has fallen for you." What? Hearing this, Yang Qindong was shocked. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it, but that he didn't think it existed at all. Although information was not so developed at that time, the matter of him falling in love with Hu Yen, the daughter of the Hu clan, would not be a secret in front of the emperor. Since the emperor knew about this matter, it was impossible for him to marry the princess to him. One had to know that according to the customs of that time, when a princess married a man of lower status, her status was even higher than that of a concubine. Not only that, as the emperor's son-in-law, he could only have this one woman in his life. Even the servant girl to warm the bed had to be chosen from the princess's own dowry. At that time this was a tyrannical treaty for men. However, if one wanted to marry the princess, one had to pay a price in order to obtain benefits. Speaking of which, this was very fair. However, this kind of fairness might be useful for a destitute scholar with no power or influence. But whether it was power or money, what did Yang Qindong lack? How could he possibly marry only the princess and restrict his own freedom? The emperor should be aware of this. In addition, for the sake of Hu Ming and Hu Jiangning, he probably wouldn't have this idea. Thus he took the initiative to omit it. Now that the two women had mentioned it, he carefully recalled Princess Shangda's attitude towards him. Only then did he realize. Princess Shangda's attitude did change a lot, but that was just her nature. The spoiled her would still act coquettishly in front of Zhu Qizhan and ask for benefits. In front of others she was even more unscrupulous. As for the waist ornament, it was just a token of love. Thinking of this, Yang Qindong's expression changed again and again. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "This can't be done. Young master, since this can't be done, we have to think of a way." Xiao Yin and Lady Shui both stepped forward, looking concerned. They could not be concerned. If the young master really married the princess, what would they do? If the princess was unreasonable and didn't allow them to stay in the Yang family, they could only leave. At that time they wouldn't even have a place to cry. For their own rights they had to do something. Yes, the young master will think of a way. However, we have to do something right now. Yang Qindong's first thought was to immediately send the betrothal gifts to the Hu family. Then he prepared to ask for the name. Although this situation was complicated, the process that had to be walked through was not something that could be omitted. But as soon as the thought appeared, Yang Qindong rejected it. Not for any other reason but because this year was a particularly important year. Before the changes in the Tumu castle happened, he couldn't do anything big. Once he provoked someone and caused unnecessary trouble, it would be bad if it led to changes. Fortunately, Princess Shangda was still young. Moreover, she was only testing the waters today. Even if she wanted to ask the emperor to grant her marriage, she still needed an opportunity. Now that he was resting at home in the name of being sick, it probably wasn't the best time to grant her marriage. Of course, the reason why Yang Qindong was so confident about this was because of Wang Zhen. He and Wang Zhen were in a cooperative relationship. They had agreed to pay him a large sum of money next year. Before the money was in his hands, he definitely didn't want to become the emperor's son-in-law and establish a connection with the imperial family. If Zhu Qizhan had such a thought, Wang Zhen would do everything possible to stop him. This was equivalent to buying time and opportunities for himself. As for after the big event, no matter what the situation was, at least Yang Qindong wouldn't be as passive as he was now. When the time came, he could find an opportunity to act first and report later. At that time, even if the emperor knew, he couldn't let Princess Changda marry a married man and share a man with others. With a plan in mind, Yang Qindong regained his confidence. "Okay, you don't need to tidy up here. Call Tiger's Mane in. I have something to ask him." Seeing that Yang Qindong seemed to be thinking about something, Xiao Yin and Lady Shui looked at each other and left. They knew that all their hopes could only be placed on the young master. They also believed that the young master would be able to solve the problem. This came from a kind of trust. At the same time, it also showed that women in ancient times were not independent. Tang Tong went back and brought back the news that Yang Si was likely to escape to Jiangning Prefecture. She also brought back Princess Shangda's attitude. Seeing that Tang Tong came back empty-handed, Qian Sengbao's face was cold and he was even prepared to hold her accountable. But when he heard that even Princess Shangda came out and said those words, he knew that it was unwise to make an issue out of Yang Qindong being beaten up by Yang Si. Since there were no benefits, he didn't want to be involved in it. He immediately arranged for a little eunuch to pass a message to the magazine king, saying that the criminal was on the run and was being arrested. He then threw the matter aside. The magazine king was originally angry because of the incident with the guard captain, Tuj. When the eunuch passed the message, he was even angrier. But soon his attention was diverted. It was not for any other reason, but because the Wallace spy in the capital of the great Ming dynasty had contacted the buyer who could buy high-yield potatoes. Compared to a guard captain being beaten up, high-yield potatoes were more important to the fate of the Walla. The magazine king put all his attention on the potato matter and even arranged for his most trusted subordinate, Tuj, to handle this matter. In his words, if this matter was done well, it would be a great merit. When the time came, he would also have a merit in front of his brother, Yes Hen. At that time, whether he would be promoted or rewarded, it wouldn't be a problem. Now that there was something to do, Tuj temporarily put aside the grudges in his hands. He brought 4 skilled subordinates and a spy to guide the group of 6 to meet with the potato seller and make a deal. Perhaps in order to gain the trust of the seller first provided 2 full bags of potato seeds. When these things were sent to the relay station, the magazine king personally checked them. After confirming that there were no mistakes, the meeting was arranged. The seller seemed to be a very careful person. He arranged for the meeting to be in a small courtyard in a remote alley. Because of the location, very few people from the warden's office paid attention to this place. On the surface, there seemed to be no problem with the safety. However, this was still a transaction in the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. If something went wrong and the Ming Dynasty took notice of their plot, it would be a big problem. Jianghu was in favor of trading in such a remote location. But for safety he still made 2 preparations. First, he didn't have much money on him. This way, even if the other party wanted to do something without enough benefits, they wouldn't easily make a move. Second, he assigned his 4 subordinates to the surroundings of the alley. If there was any trouble, the 4 of them would be able to call out to each other from a distance. He didn't believe that there was someone who could silently deal with his 4 subordinates. As long as one of them noticed that something was wrong, they could shout and attract the attention of others. After arranging everything, Tuj brought the spy to the small alley. After observing for a while and confirming that there weren't any accidents, they entered the empty courtyard. Tuj was confident that he had arranged everything perfectly. However, he didn't know that there was something called a sniper rifle. He also didn't know that this thing could be installed with a silencer that he had never heard of before. This silencer could guarantee that it could take a person's life from 1,000 meters away as easily as taking something out of a pocket. Just as Jianghu was about to enter the small courtyard, Dao Xiao and the other 10 members of the second guard squad had already arrived. They were carefully inspecting the guns and equipment. Chapter 130. The so-called seller was actually someone from the Security Bureau in disguise. Their purpose was to frame the Walla's envoy. Offense was the best defense. If you don't want others to keep an eye on you, an excellent way is to make the opponent unable to pay attention to you. If you're already in trouble, how would you have time to keep an eye on others? This was the task Yang Qindong arranged for Tiger's Mane. After receiving the task, he passed it to Yang San and asked him to arrange the details. As a secret organization, Yang San and his men were much more professional than Walla's spies. This was not only because they were better trained, but also because they were rich and well-equipped. With the advantage in all aspects, it was only natural that Tile spies had always been under the control of the Security Bureau. To lure them out and give them something that could move them was not difficult at all. On the contrary, it was very smooth. What was even more unexpected was the appearance of Jianghu. This person had once slandered the 6th young master in front of the Yang family manor's gate. Everyone had long wanted to kill this person to vent their anger. However, considering the other party's identity, they did not make a move. This time he took the initiative to come to them. How could they let him go? Not long after Jianghu and the Wallace spy entered the small courtyard, Yang San appeared with another subordinate of the Security Bureau. There was also a carriage with many bags on it. It was impossible to see the appearance of the bags in the dark. However, considering the items to be traded, it was obvious what was in the bags. Under the attention of the 4 Wallace guards, Yang San walked into the small courtyard and saw Jianghu who had arrived first. "You have a lot of potatoes in your hands?" Seeing the person who came at the agreed time and saw that the other party came in a carriage, Jianghu was satisfied but still asked cautiously. "Yes." Yang San's face was indifferent, like an emotionless humanoid machine. Since the person in front of him dared to look down on the 6th young master, it would not be an exaggeration to cut him into pieces. However, considering that Dao Xiao and the others still needed some time to complete their task, he forcefully suppressed the thought of attacking and continued to deal with Jianghu. Yang San's attitude was so cold that Jianghu felt a trace of displeasure from the bottom of his heart. However, considering that he was not here to make friends but to make a deal, he suppressed his dissatisfaction and asked again, "Who are you? Why were there so many potato seeds?" As far as I know, this thing hasn't been popularized in the Ming dynasty yet. The seeds of this thing should be very precious. Are you an officer? Yang San answered Tuj's question unhurriedly. No. Tugger shook his head. He didn't understand why the other party would ask such a question. Instead, it was the Valle spy who came with him who shook his head bitterly when he heard this. This general's bodyguard captain didn't know anything about the secret battlefront at all. How could he ask about the other party's background? It was impossible for the other party to tell him. As expected, Yang San used a gaze filled with disdain to look at Tuagur and said, "Since you aren't an official, why are you asking me these questions? You really are an idiot." Tuagur suddenly realized that he had said something wrong. However, the other party directly called him an idiot and angered him. He glared and said with a fierce expression, "You dare to scold me?" Just as Tuagur was about to flip out, the security bureau agent who had been tidying up the carriage walked into the small courtyard. According to the previous agreement, once this person entered the courtyard, it meant that the Walla agents guarding outside had all been eliminated. A strange smile flashed across Yang San's face. "So what if I scold you? I still want to kill you." After saying this, a small crossbow appeared in Yang San's hand. At this moment, he was aiming it at the angry Tuagur who was about to draw his sword. "Let's talk nicely. Let's talk nicely." Seeing Yang San take out a weapon, the Walla agent felt that the atmosphere wasn't right. He immediately tried to ease the atmosphere with a smile. How could Yang San, who already had the intention to kill, stop his killing intent because of these words? A cold smile flashed across his face. "Let's talk nicely? However, it's too late to say anything now. From the moment you entered this small courtyard, you were already destined to be dead." At the same time as his voice fell, his right index finger moved and pulled the trigger on the crossbow. Under the force of the spring mechanism, an arrow flew through the air and shot into Tuagur's chest. At the same time, outside the small courtyard, 4 hidden snipers simultaneously fired their bullets into the head of Tuagur's subordinate, who was completely unaware of the impending death. Among them, 3 bullets hit the middle of his eyebrows while 1 missed and only hit the forehead. However, the powerful lethality still took his life in the first instant. The pitiful Tuagur still maintained his posture of drawing his sword. He had an overbearing appearance as if he wanted to take the lead. He didn't know that the people he had arranged outside had all been wiped out. Furthermore, when he thought about how the other party attacked without the slightest hesitation. How was this a trade? It was clear that they were here to kill him. When Yang San made his move, his subordinates also took out the same crossbow and aimed it at the Walla spy. "If you want to live, don't shout. Otherwise you will end up like him." The Walla spy who had been scared silly by the scene in front of him was already stunned. In the end, his mission was just to gather information. He was also trained on how to hide himself. His skills were only average. Now that even Tuagur, who was extremely good at fighting, was killed without being able to fight back, what else could he do? In order to save his life, the spy stood there obediently and allowed the people from the security bureau to tie him up tightly. Even his mouth was stuffed tightly. There was another sound of footsteps outside the courtyard. Dao Xiao led the second team to clean up the 4 Walla guards who were hiding in the dark and carried their bodies inside. "Let's get to work. Create a scene and bring him back alive. He must know a lot of Walla's secrets." A sinister smile flashed across Yang San's face. Perhaps it was because of his work, but he had become much more sinister. Even in the security bureau, few people dared to interact with him too much. They seemed to be afraid of the actual leader of the security bureau. Half an hour later, a big fire suddenly appeared outside the courtyard. The fire attracted the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office. When they put out the fire with all their might, they saw the scene in the courtyard clearly. A few men wearing Walla Guards uniforms were lying dead on the ground. In front of them there were many scattered potatoes. This matter involved the Walla Guards. The 5 cities warden's office quickly reported this matter. Not long after, the Eastern Faction Warden's office and the embroidered uniform guards men arrived one after another. The leader was the Jianghu official, Tang Tong. After he recognized Tuagur's identity at a glance, his eyes flashed with anger. Another half an hour later, the magazine king, who was still waiting for news at the relay station, looked outside uneasily. Suddenly, the door of the courtyard he was resting in was pushed open from the outside. Then a group of embroidered uniform guard rushed in with torches. Not good. Instinctively, the magazine king turned around and took the scimitar that was hanging on the wall. When he turned around, Tang Tong and a few other embroidered uniform guards men had already rushed into the room. "Emissary, are you still going to resist?" Looking at the Magazine King's current appearance, Tang Tong sneered. "What are you doing? Since you know that I am an emissary, why are you treating me like this? Aren't you afraid that the Ming dynasty will fall out with the Walla?" The Magazine King relied on his identity as an emissary to threaten them. "I don't know about the matter between the Ming dynasty and the Walla, but now there is evidence that your guard captain has been buying prohibited potatoes everywhere. Now that he has been caught red-handed, I'll have to trouble the emissary to come with us and explain clearly." Tang Tong's eyes were full of threat. If the Magazine King dared to resist, he would take action. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Although he knew that Tua Gur had messed up the matter, the Magazine King still had some confidence when he thought about how he was the emissary of the Walla. "Okay, I'll come with you and see what you have to say." The Magazine King put away his scimitar, snorted coldly and strode in front of Tang Tong. Tua Gur was killed and the Magazine King was arrested. This was Yang Qindong's revenge and also successfully diverted the attention of the Magazine King. Now that the Magazine King couldn't even protect himself, how could he have the time to pay attention to Yang Qindong? Regrettably, the periodical king was, after all, the emissary of Tile. Especially after he found out about Tugger's death, he pushed all the blame onto the dead and complained about the injustice he had suffered. Without direct evidence, naturally no one could do anything to the Magazine King. However, this matter directly caused the court to be disgusted with the Walla. In particular, the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, threw out the problem of the large number of people in the Walla's diplomatic group. When the potato had just appeared, Wang Zhua had suggested to the emperor that such a good thing should not be allowed to spread. Otherwise, when those foreign countries had enough food, they would raise their soldiers and horses. From there, they would have the ability to cause trouble for the Ming dynasty. This time, the Walla actually wanted to take the potatoes back, which could be considered as touching his reverse scale. In the court, he said that according to the rules of the court, the number of people in the diplomatic group should be limited to 50 people. However, this time, the Walla actually sent a group of 3,000 people. Just the food and drink alone cost a lot of money every day. It was really like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples. When the other officials heard about this, they all had a shocked expression. Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting high on the dragon throne, had a blank expression on his face at first, then it turned into anger. He looked at Wang Zhen, who was standing beside him, and asked, "Teacher, is this really true?" Chapter 131. Wang Zhen was one of the first to know about this, but considering the benefits he received from the Walla before, he wanted to minimize the problem and let them leave. But now that it was exposed in the imperial court, some words had to be said. Replying to the emperor, the actual number is only around 2,500 people. 3,000 is a false number. Just as Wang Zhen had said, this time, Vala had indeed sent out 2,500 tributary envoys. In order to receive more rewards, they had falsely reported 3,000 people. It was normal for the Walla to falsely claim rewards. Because Wang Zhen colluded with the Walla and accepted bribes from Yes Hen, he pretended not to know. But this time the emperor took the initiative to ask, and in front of the civil and military officials, he could not hide anything. Good. Are they here to pay tribute or to ask for something? After hearing Wang Zhen's answer, Zhu Qizhen's face became very ugly, and he announced in the imperial court, "Teacher, since you have received the previous diplomatic groups, this time I will leave it to you to solve. I don't care what method you use, but in short, it is not so easy to take advantage of me." Seeing Zhu Qizhen angry, Wang Zhen immediately said, "Please rest assured, Emperor, this subject knows what to do." After the court was adjourned, Wang Zhen did not treat the king of the periodical in the same amiable manner as before. Instead, he ordered the Ministry of Rights to give out rewards according to the number of people who were present. He also rashly reduced the price of the Valago horses by 4/5, paying Valeso only 1/5 of what he had asked for. This caused the periodical king's wish not to be fulfilled, and he angrily returned. Not only that, when the large diplomatic group returned, they were strictly inspected, and all the things they brought were searched. Rummaging through the books on the grounds of preventing illegal items made the Magazine King lose face. After the angry periodical king returned to the Walla, he reported to Yes Hen with exaggerated details. When Yes Hen heard this, he was furious and immediately gathered the army, using the Ming dynasty's reduction of rewards as an excuse to split the army into four and attack the Ming dynasty, personally leading a large army to attack Datong. They were already prepared to attack the Ming dynasty, and this time they had a suitable excuse. For a time, the border area was filled with the flames of war, and alarms were constantly sounding. Wallace cavalry was ferocious, and they quickly advanced to the south. The Ming dynasty soldiers guarding the northwest were defeated several times, and they hurriedly requested reinforcements from the capital. Wallace's betrayal and the start of the war, once the news reached the capital, it caused a huge commotion. For a moment, they were all guessing which general the emperor would send as reinforcements to conquer Walla. While everyone was guessing, one person's heart beat wildly. He thought that his chance to become famous in the world had come. This person was the head eunuch of the imperial palace, the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, Wang Zhen. Even though Wang Zhen, who could be said to be able to cover the sky with one hand, could be said to have absolute power at that time. Although some people had no choice but to rely on him because of his power, he was still a eunuch in the end. Other than his trusted aides, no one knew how to secretly curse him. If Wang Zhen were to fall from power one day, the first to attack him would be those who relied on him. Furthermore, Wang Zhen might not always be able to cover the sky with one hand, because his power came from Emperor Zhu Qizhen. As long as Zhu Qizhen no longer trusted him and was suspicious of him, he only needed to casually say a few words to make Wang Zhen lose the entire game. No matter how much power he had, he could not jump out of Zhu Qizhen's 5 fingers. This was what Wang Zhen was worried about. If he wanted to become an evergreen tree, he had to truly grasp the Ming dynasty's military power and reach the peak of power. To achieve this, it was far from enough to arrange a few trusted aides. Only by leading the great Ming dynasty's army to victory could he truly establish his prestige in the army. For this reason, he decided to urge Zhu Qizhen to personally lead the northern expedition to Walla. If he succeeded as the leader, he would naturally have great merits. At that time, he would have many opportunities to touch the military power. Once this desire appeared in his heart, he had a feeling that he could not retreat. His whole body felt as if it was on fire, making him unable to sit still for a moment. Where is His Majesty now? Wang Zhen's heart was in turmoil. He really wanted to ask Zhu Qizhen to go to war, so he asked a little eunuch beside him. Replying to eunuch Wang, His Majesty is resting with the Empress. Good, let's go see His Majesty. Wang Zhen stood up, tidied up his sleeves and walked straight to the rear palace with firm steps. At this time, Zhu Qizhen was resting in Empress Qian's palace. His complexion was not very good. Vala's violation of the border was somewhat out of his expectations and caught him off guard. When he saw that more and more requests for help were coming in from the border, he decided to leave the Palace of Heavenly Purity and go to the Empress Palace to relax. As for how to deal with this matter and who to send, the important officials would probably come up with a plan. This was one of the benefits of being the emperor. If he ran into problems or problems he didn't want to deal with, he could just toss them to someone else. Empress Qian was extremely virtuous. When she saw that Zhu Qizhen's mood wasn't too good, she had all the maids and eunuchs leave the palace. She was the only one accompanying the emperor to rest in his chambers. She even suggested that if the emperor was too bored, he should take a trip to the immortal abode to relax. Zhu Qizhen was somewhat moved by the emperor's suggestion. The immortal abode had been open for more than half a year now, and there was always an endless supply of delicious food and fun things to do inside. When he heard people talk about it in the past, he would always look forward to it. However, because he was the emperor, leaving the palace would cause too much of a ruckus. That was why he had always suppressed this thought. Now that the empress was so supportive of him, he was truly moved. Empress Qian was worried about Zhu Qizhen's health after seeing how distressed he was, so she made this suggestion. When she saw that the emperor was actually moved, she smiled sweetly. If your majesty wishes to go, you can disguise yourself as a commoner. However, you must bring more people with you. Your safety is still very important. Yes, the empress is absolutely right. How about this? We will immediately call General Fan Zhong over and have him arrange for more people to protect us. Zhu Qizhen couldn't wait any longer. There was a trace of urgency in his voice. The emperor issued a decree, and General Fan Zhong quickly brought over 100 Huban soldiers to prepare for the emperor's departure. It was at this time that Wang Zhen arrived. He was dressed in official robes. Only the eunuchs who served the emperor were allowed to wear such clothing. As soon as Wang Zhen arrived, Zhu Qizhen happily said, "Teacher, Immediately change into a set of casual clothes and accompany us to the immortal abode. Let's see what new delicacies they have. Originally, Wang Zhen had been thinking about how to broach the subject of his personal expedition with Zhu Qizhen. Now that the emperor wanted to go to the immortal abode, it was absolutely quiet and there were even private rooms there. It was much more convenient to discuss matters. He immediately agreed. As he went to change his clothes, he also arranged for someone to notify the last-ranked eunuch, Mao Mu, and have him notify Yang Qindong as soon as possible so that he could make the necessary arrangements. Yang Village. Lung Feng from Crimson City had arrived. He was personally led by Xiao Feng, who was already a battalion commander. Bai Zhua, the captain of the Phantom Sniper Squad, had also arrived with them. There were a total of 20 members, 10 of them snipers and 10 of them observers. When Xiao Feng arrived, he was immediately called to the study to give a detailed report of the situation on Little Ryukyu Island. From Xiao Feng's words, Yang Qindong learned that the majority of Little Ryukyu Island was already under the control of the Yang clan. Only the central northern region had not been recovered. This was because the population was too small, and they needed time to digest it. Otherwise, they would have been able to take down the entire Ryukyu Island in one go. Currently, on Little Ryukyu Island, the number of local aboriginals and the commoners that Deng Maoqi had taken away during his uprising added up to about 400,000 people. Among them, there were only 4,000 people who had truly passed the various tests to become members of Lung Feng. There were 2,000 in the army and 2,000 in the navy, for a total of 40 companies. According to the statistics of 4 companies per battalion, there were 5 battalions in the navy and 5 battalions in the army. As for the auxiliary soldiers and the children's regiment, there were close to 20,000 people. Very good. There's no need to rush the matter of Lung Feng changing from a battalion to a regiment. After listening to Xiao Feng's account, Yang Qindong's face was filled with satisfaction. Tall buildings were built from the ground up. The foundation was often the most important. If the organization of the army was messed up at the beginning, it would take a lot of effort to correct it later on. Rather than spending a lot of effort to reorganize it later on, it was better to lay a good foundation from the beginning and take one step at a time. After asking about the development of the army, he asked about the progress of the factories. He even asked about Yu Qian and Xin Yu's situation. According to Xiao Feng, the development and construction of the various cities in the factory were being carried out in an orderly manner. Other than the ships that went to the west to search for rubber and the power plant that could not be started, the other factories had entered the planning stage of development. The various goods that they produced were already self-sufficient and could be considered for expansion. Yu Qian and Xin Yu's situation was also very stable. When they first arrived at Resin City, they were shocked by the technological development and everything that they saw. As they gained a deeper understanding, they showed great interest in these developments and even took the initiative to participate in some things. However, when Xiao Feng said, however, he was still carefully observing Yang Qindong's expression. If you have something to say, just say it. Yang Qindong smiled. He knew that as the system grew stronger, the gap between his relationship with the people under him would also grow bigger. However, he still wanted to hear more of the truth. He did not want to lie to his superiors. Yes. Xiao Feng quickly responded, then said, however, when they found out that all the changes were related to the 6th young master and had nothing to do with the Ming dynasty, they showed strong resistance. They put down the work at hand and stayed in the house that we arranged for them. Chapter 132. Yu Qian and Xin Yu were officials of the Great Ming dynasty. One was a self-proclaimed Wen Tianxiang, while the other was an imperial censor. They were both people with integrity. Yang Qindong had long thought that the other party would not accept the changes in Crimson City so easily, especially since it was not under the management of the Great Ming dynasty. There would be resistance and incomprehension, but these two people were people who valued the country more than the king. As long as they saw that the ones benefiting were the common people, their thoughts would eventually change. It was just a matter of how long it would take. Yang Qindong firmly believed that time could change a person. Oh, they've been staying in the room all this time? Yang Qindong's smile was written all over his face. He was not surprised by the two people's uncooperative attitude. Yes and no. At first, they stayed in the room, but the 6th young master also knew that even in the room, the facilities inside were completely different from the Ming dynasty. In addition, after their relatives were safely sent back, they began to appear on the streets again. At first, they did not speak much, but when I received the order to come to the capital, They had already made friends with many of the common people in the city. It could be seen that the smiles on their faces were getting more and more. This is a good phenomenon. When he heard this, Yang Qindong was already certain that these two people would definitely be used by him. The only difference was the length of time. Everything caused by little Lioli was developing steadily. This was where Yang Qindong's confidence came from. There was no need to talk about advancing. If there were any accidents, he would have a place to retreat. So what did he not dare to do? Next, he had to consider how to make a good Walla's offense. Should he let the Tumu Fortress incident continue? Yang Qindong knew that the Ming dynasty's elites were all lost in the Tumu Fortress incident. From then on, the Ming dynasty began to weaken. But even so, under the efforts of many people, it still persisted for a very long time. But in the end, the Ming dynasty was defeated in the end. It was defeated because of internal strife. If not for the fact that the power was too scattered, the aristocrats, scholars, and eunuchs were holding each other back, and sometimes they could not even carry out the emperor's orders, how could there be the possibility of the Manchurian Tatars entering the pass? And how could there be the scene of the magnificent China being bullied and humiliated 300 years later? Originally, he had been considering whether he should take action to change history. However, when he thought of the actions of the Ming dynasty's monarch and the tragic history in the future, he shook his head and completely gave up on this idea. Forget it, if there were no elites, then so be it. The deaths of a few people in exchange for a happy life for more people. Especially since China was able to stand at the top of the world, it was appropriate no matter how one looked at it. Young Master, Eunuch Mao sent word that Eunuch Wang Zhen sent word that His Majesty is going to the immortal abode. He asked for you to make arrangements in advance. Tiger's Mane appeared in the study and reported the news he'd just received. All right, I understand. Yang Qindong's expression froze for a moment. Then a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. It was about time. This Wang Zhen was going to make a move to dissuade Zhu Qizhen. Immortal abode. Yang Qindong's sudden arrival caused Mu Lily, who was on duty, to be extremely nervous. Yang Xi's matter had obviously been suppressed by Dong Shuai. Now, every time she returned to the Yang clan manor, she could see Yang Xi. The two of them were gradually warming up. They were just waiting for the right opportunity to get married. All of this was thanks to Yang Qindong. When she saw Dong Shuai enter the immortal abode, Mu Lily hurried over to greet him. She said respectfully, "Sixth young master, why have you come?" "I need to receive an important guest." "How about this? Immediately prepare the best private room and arrange for some quick-witted and nimble attendants to serve him." Yang Qindong nodded at Mu Lily with a smile. Then he turned to Tiger's Mane and gave him a light nod, indicating for him to check the surroundings. Regardless of whether or not the emperor would bring guards with him, if something really did happen, he would still be in a lot of trouble. Tiger's Mane led Mu Lily up to the third floor with a group of people. They entered the private room and carefully inspected it. After confirming that there were no problems, they went downstairs. What they saw was a young man dressed like a noble young master, escorted by a group of people, arriving at the immortal abode's entrance. "Young master, you've come." Yang Qindong smiled as he walked over to greet him. When he saw Zhu Qizhen, who was dressed like a noble young master, he didn't kneel. Zhu Qizhen was dressed casually. He obviously didn't want others to know his identity. He didn't feel the slightest bit of displeasure at Yang Qindong's refusal to kneel. On the contrary, he nodded happily. Wang Zhen, who was also dressed casually, asked in a low voice, "Sixth young master, has everything been arranged?" "It's been arranged. The best private room on the third floor. Please." Yang Qindong nodded lightly, indicating that everything was ready. He turned around and led the way up the stairs to the third floor. In order to protect the privacy of their guests, the immortal abode had even covered the two sides of the stairs with red cloth. This way, only the owner would know who the guests were and no one else would know. This was exactly what Zhu Qizhen wanted, and he boldly made his way to the third floor. In the private room, Zhu Qizhen sat on the east side, while Wang Zhen carefully waited on him. Yang Qindong left after asking what the emperor wanted to eat and what songs and dances he wanted to perform on the first floor. With his current status, it wasn't appropriate for him to appear in this kind of setting. If he insisted on appearing, the difference in status would only make him feel awkward. Now that there was no one else in the private room, Wang Zhen took the opportunity to voice his opinion, urging Zhu Qizhen to personally lead the troops. "Your Majesty, you are young and promising and your heroic bearing is flourishing. Today the great Ming dynasty is prosperous, and the people live a prosperous life. All of this is inextricably linked to your wise leadership. Wang Zhen smiled as he praised Zhu Qixin. Naturally, everyone was willing to listen to flattery, and Zhu Qixin was no exception. Even though he heard nothing but flattery every day, it didn't stop him from continuing to listen. Teacher, our country's stability is due to the efforts of my subjects, as well as your contributions. Zhu Qixin drank the fine wine and ate the piping hot delicacies that had just been served. Through the transparent glass, he watched the lively singing and dancing on the first floor. He watched the singers wearing the miniskirts that Yang Qindong had suggested, singing and dancing. It was truly a joyous sight. Zhu Qixin knew that the costumes of these dancers had received a lot of criticism when they first appeared. There were even some who sent him memorials about it, causing quite a stir. In the end, Wang Zhen took the initiative to resolve this issue. He insisted that this was all a commercial activity, and that it was to serve the public. It was a delicacy in the eyes of many. In fact, this kind of event had attracted countless so-called gentlemen to watch. Many of them cursed the spider lilies while enjoying the benefits. It really was the type of person who enjoyed pain and pleasure at the same time. Now that Zhu Qixin was in such a good mood, Wang Zhen felt that coming to the immortal abode to discuss this matter was the correct decision. At the same time, he said what he wanted to say. Your Majesty, your ability to rule the world has already reached the peak. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that no one will be able to do it in the future, but at the very least, no one has done it before. However, in the end you are still lacking by a little bit. Everyone says that true experts conquer the world on horseback, and rule the world from horseback. You still lack the ability to personally lead an imperial army and cut through all obstacles on the battlefield. If you can accomplish this, I can imagine that the title of the #1 sage monarch in history would belong to none other than your Majesty. Personally lead an imperial army? Zhu Qixin had never thought about this before, so Wang Zhen's words piqued his interest. Zhu Qixin was only 22 years old. He was young, energetic, and full of vigor. At the same time, he had the same impulsiveness and desire for success as other young people. Originally, he hadn't thought about personally leading an imperial army, and had even been worried about who to send to lead the troops. However, when he heard that he could personally lead the troops, it was as if a door had been opened in his mind. It was like a bright light had suddenly appeared in the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. Yes, you will personally lead an imperial army. Wang Zhen, who had been paying attention to Zhu Qixin, noticed that the emperor didn't have the slightest bit of reluctance. On the contrary, he had an expression of eagerness. He immediately knew that there was hope, so he continued to advocate. Think about Han Dynasty's Emperor Gaozu, Liu Bang, who was the first emperor to lead an imperial army and unite the world. Liu Yu personally led many expeditions to the north, establishing the Liu Song. Tang Taizong, Li Shimin, personally led an expedition to Goguryeo. There was also Emperor Cheng who led 3 expeditions to Mongolia, forcing them to surrender. However, when they heard the name of Emperor Cheng, they trembled in fear. Right now, your Majesty is still young and we have millions of mighty soldiers. Facing a small walla, we can easily win in a single battle. Moreover, the fame of our army will spread far and wide. Wherever we go, I'm afraid that the enemy will collapse without fighting. In the future, when people mention your Majesty's name, I'm sure that they will also tremble in fear, not daring to offend the Ming dynasty in the slightest. In this way, your Majesty will definitely be recorded in the history books. It is also very possible for your Majesty to become an eternal emperor. Under Wang Zhen's description, Zhu Qixin seemed to have already seen himself leading a mighty army into battle. Wherever he went, the enemy would tremble in fear and surrender at the sight of the wind. Weapons and armor would be thrown all over the ground, and there would be countless deserters and surrenders. Good. As if he was under the influence of self-hypnosis, Zhu Qixin let out a series of cheers, followed by a hearty laugh. The emperor was so happy that Wang Zhen's face also revealed a somewhat abnormal luster. The military power that he had longed for a long time seemed to be within his reach. After this battle, he would return to the court victorious. At that time, even if the emperor wanted to touch him, he wouldn't be completely powerless to fight back. He could still live for a few more decades. At that time, what position would he be in? What kind of glory and achievements would he enjoy? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.